For the South Tahoe PUD, I'd like to ask you all to please stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, thank you everyone for coming. It's good to see a good turnout like this. This is what we appreciate input from the public on the items we're going to be discussing today. At this time, I'd like to ask for comments from the audience on non-agenda items. So if you're here to talk about rates, this isn't the time. So does anybody have anything on non-agenda items? Yeah, yes.
Where I live over on Tahoe, I don't know if anybody's called in about this because the city's been called out, but there's like water that's coming up.
Okay, would you want to come up and come to the podium?
I'm assuming this is on the agenda. I live over the corner of Tahoe, and we've had for about a month. There's been water that's been coming up by the culverts and running into the culvert at our corner, and then just spreading dampness. I've called the city out twice.
The city or our staff?
I've called the city because it's still on city property, and there's been a fellow that's come down from the city services, down on Tahoe. And he says that it's happening all over town, but we literally have like a spring right above the top of the culvert, and it's filling in going under Tahoe and under D, and then down Tahoe in front of my neighbors. And there's slime and orange stuff, and he says it's bacteria, it's not oil, which is what I called it in the first place. But the water seepage into the ground around it is just getting bigger and bigger. And I don't know, he told me to call you guys, and it's like, it's on city property. I think city.
Chris, do you know anything about this?
I do not, but I will send a gentleman out right now to go out and take a look in the next half hour. What we'll do is we go out and we test it and see if there's chlorine in it. And then that should tell us whether it's drinking water or if it's just regular groundwater.
This fellow from the city said that he sees it happening all over in the neighborhood. I have never seen it ever before. We've been there.
There is a lot of groundwater this spring, so it could be that. But like Chris says, our staff has ways of testing it. They can find out if it's water from our district water distribution. They can find out if it's in the sewer system. They can find that out.
Whether water, anything that you have come up, please feel free to call the district first.
Okay.
And we'll go out and take a look at it.
And what was it called?
D Tahoe. So it's the culverts running, north-south or south-north on Tahoe, and it goes underneath D Street, and it's on the west corner, the west side of the street.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to assume that's it on non-agenda item comments. So, do you have any corrections in the agenda?
I just have a comment on the one item C, the geographical information system. I'm fully going to look forward to it. It's a good project. But I talked to John Monday about possibly having some staff come in and explain to us what they're doing. I think it'd be good for the whole board to see what's can be done in the process.
Yeah, we'll plan to schedule a staff update on GIS and asset management in the near future.
Okay, sounds good, John. Thanks. Anything else? Okay, how about a motion?
I'll say.
Okay, thank you. All right, at this time, what I'd like to do is open a public hearing. Let me see here. Yeah, I can open the public hearing at this point. What we're going to do is, what? A little louder. Okay. We're going to have a Proposition 218 public hearing to receive comments, public protests regarding the proposed water and sewer rate increases. We're going to have some information presented by staff first, and then once the staff has presented all this information, I will be asking if anybody in the audience wants to comment on that also. So whoever wants to kick this thing off from staff, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Okay, as Randy mentioned, this is the Proposition 218 public hearing. How about now? Good. The public hearing agenda today is, we're going to start by opening the public hearing, and report on the customer notifications, present the proposed rates, listen to public comment, receive additional protests if any, and then close the public hearing and report on the protests received. The Prop 218 notices were sent out on March the 29th, which is well within the 45 days that we're required to do so. We also used several public outreach, such as direct mail, email, press release, radio, TV interviews, and public meetings. The proposed rate increase consists of sewer of up to 5% increase on sewer, which includes the repair and replace of old sewer pipes, the upgrade aging pump stations and wastewater treatment plant facilities to avoid costly emergencies at sewer spills, and to extend the useful life of assets. On the water side, there is proposed to go up to 6% for water system improvements. It also includes to replace the old and undersized water lines, to install new fire hydrants, upgrading pumping and storage facilities, provide adequate water for firefighting, and extend the useful life of all the assets. At this time, I'd like to ask Randy if you'd like to open up the meeting for public comment.
Sure. I think if you're standing or I'll get you out of the way. And so if anyone has a comment or anything, if you're in the, I don't think we'd be on live during the comment process. If you have a question or anything, we have enough staff here, we can probably answer any of your questions. So anybody, yeah, sure. You could be the icebreaker. Yeah, and I just have one request. If you just state your name first, and then your comments.
My name is Linda Bourgeois, and I'm a 25-year resident here. I live in Bishop Pines, and my question is about the process today. I received a flyer in the mail. It wasn't enclosed in my bill about the meeting today, and if we were opposed, we were to fill out a little form with our parcel number and our signature if we are opposed. But I'm distressed because none of my neighbors received the notification, and that little slip of paper that indicates if we're opposed or not has to be submitted today prior to the end of the meeting, cannot be faxed or emailed. And so there's people in my neighborhood that had no knowledge of the meeting today. They didn't receive the flyer. And I had a conversation with a couple of the neighbors today, and I was able to share my flyer with them. But that's a concern, especially when a meeting is at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a day for many people is a work day. They can't attend the meeting. So that's my question. I'd like to know when the flyer was mailed, because there's not a postmark on it. And also, if today is the absolute deadline for people to oppose.
Okay, thank you. Tim, would you explain the process on that? And I find it interesting that her neighbors didn't get that. Can you kind of expand on that a little bit?
Basically, what we do is we take a mailing list from our billing system of everyone who is,
Can't hear you.
basically what we do is take everyone who is on our billing system who receives water or sewer services only. We pull the addresses from the billing system to mail that out to the customer. So, like I said, that went out on March the 29th, and I don't have any knowledge of why.
Did it go out in a separate mailing?
It did.
Did it go out with the
Separate
bill
mailing.
also, or just a separate mailing?
It went out on a separate mailing.
Okay. So I don't really know why your neighbors might not have got it. It could have been, it resembled junk mail or something. I don't know.
For renters?
Why is today at this meeting, the end of the meeting, the last opportunity for them to respond if they didn't receive it?
We can still take protests now.
Okay, well, on the flyer, it says today's before the end of the meeting.
Yes, today is the deadline.
So that's a problem for people that didn't get it. They probably won't find out the results of this meeting, and then it's too late for them to respond.
Jim, can you pull up your previous slide on your PowerPoint? Yeah, that one right there. This has been an ongoing process. It's been a priority of this board to make sure people were as informed as we possibly could be. We've had our general manager going out through the community to different service clubs, whatever organization we're having. We've been on radio and TV promoting this. We sent out, how many emails?
We sent out
2 sets of emails.
Yeah, 2 sets of emails with about 8,000.
8,000 emails, and just as a point of reference, we have about 13,000 customers. So it troubles me that your neighbors think they weren't notified, when I'm really pretty sure that we've got a lot of different modes and a lot of different modes to try to get the information out there.
Starting since December on a specific effort.
Were they owners or renters that also?
The people that pay the water and sewer bills.
Yeah, so then they would have been the ones that we were trying to get the information out to. And we started this process in December, by the way. We've had numerous workshops and situations for people to give input. And why I appreciate everybody that's here today, and I'm glad you all came, but throughout the process, there were opportunities also to give input on this while this was taking shape. So,
It's the same mailing list as our customer list, so if you're getting a bill, you would have received this list, absolutely.
Yes.
The same company that sends out the bills sent out this notice using that same mailing list.
Yes.
Thank you.
yeah, hope that answered. Anybody else have a comment?
Sure. My name is Mike. Hi, everybody. Please, I'm alluding to the notice of public hearing, proposed rate changes sheet. And I'm just curious, it says, and I speak verbatim, most of the water and sewer system was built in the 1950s and 60s. I was just curious, it says additional investments are needed to extend the life. What's been done in the interim?
Good question. John, you want that one?
Since sure. We've been doing a lot since the 50s and 60s. I can speak maybe more to the recent decades. And maybe just starting with the sewer side, because initially the district was just a sewer agency. We were not in the water business. So let me talk about the sewer side for a little bit. It was a master plan system. The SDPUD began in 1950, and a lot of the infrastructure was built in the 50s and the early 60s. And probably, let me talk to the last 10, 20 years. There's been rate increases. We've been using those rate increases to actually improve our system. We spent on the water and sewer side, we funded over $50 million of improvements in the past 5 years with the rate increases that those funded. So we have repaired and replaced many components within the treatment plant. We've upgraded many components in our pumping system. We actually have 41 pump stations in our service area. That's that's a huge number and a lot of assets for basically kind of a small mountain town. So there's a lot of infrastructure, almost, well, about $1.5 billion of infrastructure currently is in service for you. So over the years, your user rates, and including any rate increases, have been used to maintain and improve the system over time. So, you know, I talked about the plant, I talked about the collection system, some of the pump stations. There's also been a lot of work done to, we're required to export our treated water out of the basin. So all of the wastewater gets treated right out back here, and then it's pumped out to Luther Pass and over Luther Pass, and then it goes down to the Diamond Valley between Woodford's and Markleyville. The district owns or operates, manages about 3,000 acres, and all of our treated effluent is used for pasture irrigation. We have some of our own facilities. We just completed about 70 acres of pivot rate irrigation. So the recycled water is used for irrigation. We also have a hydro recovery facility off that export line. When we're not irrigating, we're producing some power. So we've, you know, what have we done? Really what we do, and it's really afforded by our engineering department, is we look ahead. We look at our system, and we look at the consequence of failure and the probability of failure of certain assets over time. So look at the risk of failure, you know, when we're going to see, when do we need to spend money? Basically, what's the condition of our assets? What can we do to extend the life of those assets to minimize our current costs? And then make replacements when it makes sense. So basically doing the right project at the right time, and I would say for the right price.
Thank you. Yeah.
And just real quick on that, you addressed the sewer side. On the water side, historically there was a bunch of small, we call them mom and pop operations, the Globin, some of these other little water systems. Over time, it made more sense to the community to have that run by one organization. So SDPUD kind of collected these small water systems. They were often put in with substandard line sizes, substandard materials, and substandard workmanship. And so over the years, we've had a lot of money spent on replacing that infrastructure as well.
So the district started consolidating these small independent water companies in the mid-1970s for the community overall. And again, a lot of those water lines are built with, you know, non-standard materials. I mean, the district was not responsible for the initial installation. And we've been doing a lot on our water system, especially in the last 10 to 15 years, to improve the system. Upsize water lines, add fire hydrants, replace and add new storage tanks, a lot of new wells, and really develop a sustainable, resilient system for the community. We have about 150 miles of water lines in our system. Again, that's a big number for a small town. And more than half of that 150 miles are steel water lines. And we're most concerned about the steel water lines. One of our big pushes in the next 18 months is to really go out in our system and find out, again, looking at condition assessment. What's the condition of our water line assets? Which of those assets can we implement systems such as corrosion protection systems to extend the life of those assets? If we have to replace those assets, the cost is much larger. So we're looking to get ahead of the curve, find out which assets we can extend, you know, their useful life. There's going to be some that are just, they're used up, they're corroded, they're too small, they have to be replaced. And that really provides the basis for this 5 and 10 year plan that we have before you today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, and Liz, I saw a few other hands up there, so first come, first served.
Hi, my name is Larry Bosser. I've been a homeowner in this community for over a half a century. I know that you have expenses and rate increase is going to be inevitable to maintain the infrastructure. I would expect that the lion's share of your expenses are in the sewer treatment and export. yet you've chosen to meter the water usage and bill on that basis, assuming that the more water used, the more effluents going into the sewer system. But that's not correct for people with large gardens and lawns, as I have. And I'm wondering if there could be a soft spot in your rate structure for our senior citizens, or our super seniors, or our veterans, or those few of us that are all three. Because I am one of those that has a large lawn and a large garden. As a matter of fact, we bought the lot next door and it turned it into nothing but a garden. And so that the lion's share of our water usage does not go into the sewer system and is not raising your expenses for your effluent treatment. So my hope is that you'll find consideration for the super senior veterans in our community. Thanks.
Well, thank you. I don't know why I always pick on you, John. I can answer this, but
I'll give it a shot.
I got a shot. Maybe address first the why we metered and how that relates to the sewer system.
Sure. State law requires us to install meters on every customer by 2025. We're actually, we've been using a lot of low-interest loans subsidized by the state, and back in 2010 and 2011, if you remember the American Recovery and Relief Act, we received, I think, over $4 million of grants, federal grants to install meters. So we've been, we didn't want to install meters. We fought that in Sacramento. We lost that battle. But once we were faced with having to install that, we're looking at probably over a $26 million project, this meter project, $26 million. We would rather have spent that on water lines and hydrants and other facilities, but state law, we're implementing this water meter program as cost effectively as possible. It's intended and it's planned to be a net neutral program. So we're not adding meters to try to get more revenue. Typically when people are metered, they use less water. So that can be a revenue problem for various water districts. Over 80% of your bill is a base charge, a base water bill. So that remaining, let's say 15%, varies depending on how much you use water. Getting back to state law and Prop 218, which is a state law also requires us to be fair and equitable in how we bill customers for their water. So your bill needs to reflect the actual cost to provide service. And that can differ by customer class, between a business and a single-family residence, how much water you use, when you use it, do you use it on peak days, do you use it in the summer or the winter? So we had to look at all those factors and develop these fair and equitable cost structures on that basis. So it's not really a decision that the district or even staff makes. We're following state law to meet these guidelines to provide this type of service that's mandated. So as you use more water, we need to bring on more wells to meet that demand. And some of our wells cost more to operate than other wells. So just to extend that line of thinking, if you use the base amount of water, we're using half of our wells. If there's more irrigation in the summer, we need to add additional wells, peaking wells that cost more to operate. So the cost of that additional service, for example, is more costly. So that's what's behind some of the two-tiered rate structure that we have for water. I would also, that kind of speaks to meters, and in fact, 100% of our customers will be metered by next year. So we're way ahead of schedule and under budget because of the way we've done these projects since 2010 especially. Speaking a little bit to our costs between water and sewer, those are totally separate funds. So the water fund is essentially operated as its own entity, and it's independent of the sewer collection, treatment, and export costs. So there's really no commingling between those two funds, and between the two bills that you get are completely separate, based on the cost to provide each one of those services, water and sewer. Does that answer, I think, some or most of your questions, sir?
You mentioned a senior veteran discount. It is true, yes, we do not have a discount program like that right now. We do have a low-income discount, which provides a 25% discount to the water and sewer bill for those individuals. I would be willing to look into this and just do some investigation to see if there's some other agencies that are doing it and how it's being funded and so forth.
And we recently increased that assistance program from 20 to 25% of the bill. So if you qualify for that assistance, it can reduce your bill by up to 25%.
Yes, sir. My concern here is Social Security gave a 2% increase in the cost of living. You're asking for a 15%. 13, 15? One on there? Am I correct?
It's up to 5 or 6% per year.
Double, put the two together, what is it?
It's not added to it. It would be
It's an 11% increase is what you're asking for?
6% on water and 5%
Who's the board here?
on sewer.
Which one's the board?
I'm going to say,
What's this?
okay, Paul Hughes, who spoke just a minute ago, is our chief financial officer, and so he.
Okay, these are employees.
Yes.
Okay, that's.
All right, so I can, just so that you know, the 218 process enables each board to raise rates in a given year for that year's budget. It's only for 1 year. Now, what it enables, it's a 5-year 218, so that next year when this budget comes around, the next board that's sitting here, which there's no election between now and then, so it should be us, can raise up to that maximum amount. Let's say the board, for every 5 years, said, I'm going to do that. I'm going to raise it to the max. I think 6% year over year for 5 years is actually 34%. But the board at any given year does not have to spend that full 5% or 6%. It's based on that particular year's budget.
I would like to see a reduction.
Okay.
I also noticed that that you're not, you march to your own drum. You have your own agenda. My meaning by that, you're not governed by the California Public Utilities Commission. Why is that? How did you get your own free will, if you will?
Gary, do you want to answer that?
Sure. There's two types of utilities in California. One are investor-owned utilities that are basically private corporation owned by shareholders. Those are governed by the Public Utilities Commission, and they have to go before the commission to set their rates. This district is what they call a special district, public utility district, and there's several different variations throughout the state. But it's a public agency, has its own elected board, and is empowered to provide these services and adopt their own rates, but in compliance with Prop 218. So that's two. They're two different animals.
I'm not familiar with Prop 218.
Prop 218 is a process that John, the general manager, just mentioned. It ensures that the rates, as he said, are fair and equitable. In other words, they reflect the cost of providing the service to the district. And the district can't raise rates more than what it costs to provide the service. That's the limitation on it, and it provides a process for the district's customers to have input and just like you're doing today, to just inform the board on whether you're for them, against them, you think they should be changed. And that whole process is what the district's been going through for the last several months to get input from the public on proposed rates.
Okay. Why is a bond not being floated to take care of these issues rather than beat up the ratepayers?
Well, it's actually a combination of the two. Generally, the rates are raised. The district historically has borrowed funds through some sort of loan mechanism, and then they use the rates to make the principal and interest payments on those loans.
Right, correct.
Yeah.
So I can buy your bond and then make my money back and subsidize my bill.
Well, they're actually not bonds, they've been state subsidized loans, low interest loans, so it actually hasn't been an actual investment bond.
Okay, so why don't we do that instead of 13 or nothing?
Because it's actually a lot more expensive. The interest rates that we receive would be double what we're getting now. And so potentially we'd have to raise rates higher to make the annual principal payments.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Our system improvements are funded by a combination of current user rates, which also fund loans over 20 or 30-year periods. Some of the recent loan products we've gotten through the state have been at 1.64 to 1.8% per year. So they're subsidized by the federal and state government. So that's really the most cost-efficient way to get this work done. Yes, please.
Got my reading glasses on, so it's fuzzy.
That's okay, I got mine on too.
My name is Laura Wilkinson. We're new residents on 508 Cayuga, and we evacuated from the Paradise Fire back in November. It's odd to become residents here because this town reminds me a lot of Paradise, where they're trying to get up and running on a very old town, and the costs often fall onto the residences instead of, as I see it, a better distribution of having to get this work done that has been 50, 60 years neglected, so to speak. So the last meeting you had, I got a really good understanding of the complexity of pumping water and sewage through these mountains and whatnot, so I thank you for that. And I can see the costs that are involved in such a system. Being new here, what I hear a lot in the loop of conversations is it's becoming too expensive to live here, and many people work here but live in Carson City, or are moving to Carson City because of these infrastructure costs, and water and sewage being quite large. And so that's what I wanted. I had 5 questions or so about the costs. But one thing I had to agree with this gal in that a friend of ours moved over into the Angora area. They bought their house a month and a half ago. They knew nothing about this whatsoever. And if the vote to oppose or not oppose this came on a little slip of paper, I don't know how people could make their wishes known, maybe through email. We didn't get anything like that. We had our little slip of paper to be mailed in. So they're new homeowners a month and a half in, and nowhere's within their escrow were they notified of anything this increase for water and sewage. So I just wanted to give you that information. So new homeowners during this process, as you said, it started in December, are not being made aware of this at all. They're just going to end up having the bill come and have to pay it. The cost questions I have are, there was a really extensive spreadsheet with pictures. You turn one page and there'd be a picture of a graph. And I'm wondering what the cost of that was, because it was about yay thick. And so what was the cost in having to send that out so that you could bring that information to the public?
I know it's the rate study information provided at a public hearing.
It was huge.
And I think is that not available essentially on our website? So you could view that presentation. And I think that
what was how was that cost covered, and what did that cost? Your
rate consultant?
Yeah.
Yeah, Paul, could you talk to talk about the rate consultant?
Yes, the rates were prepared by HDR Engineering.
And what was the cost of that?
It was $60,000.
And how does that get passed? How does that get covered?
It gets paid for by the rate revenue, district rate revenue.
Okay. So through people's water bills?
And believe me, if we could have, in an ideal world, I would have loved to say, well, we know better than anybody what our needs are. And I think we could generate a budget based on those needs. And then we could also say we need a certain rate level to justify those needs. And so why do we need to spend $60,000 on a consultant to tell us that? Well, it's really simple. We're not allowed to by state law. You know, if the 218 process isn't done exactly right,
Let's see.
you were talking about how thick it is. I don't even know, Gary, how thick would the 218, you know, if you went through all the rules that Sean went through to develop this process, I mean, it's quite a substantial amount of documents.
So you're obligated
We are
to hire
obligated to
someone
do
out to
that.
justify what you're having to do.
And it's another reason we do this every 5 years instead of every year, so that we don't have to spend money every year on this consultant.
Okay, thank you. I'm just trying to educate myself. And the overall 5 to 10 year increase plan that you have, and I don't have that paperwork with me today, what chunk of that, because you have fire hydrants, water lines, all kinds of things to take care of throughout the mountains, what percentage of that cost goes for administrative costs?
Paul, can you say exactly? It's approximately 30% is for administrative cost of the district.
I'd maybe like to talk to that a little bit when we're talking about what type of funding these rate increases will support. We're looking at, on the water side, for example, $67–70 million of improvements over 10 years. And all of that is for system improvements, is for road projects, asset management programs to extend the useful life. It's the installation of water lines, pumps, tanks.
Yeah, you've done a really great job of breaking all that down in your last meeting, but I just kind of want to work with whole chunks of numbers to get a simple understanding of the distribution of costs.
Are you asking what percentage of our budget is related to personnel and?
Yeah, administration. And he said 30% of this increase will go to administration.
30% is closer to the number of the wages and benefits to the entire district staff. So it would be something smaller if we were talking about just administration.
Yeah, I don't want to pick it apart. I just wanted a chunk. I had about 3 more questions if I could, please. One thing I didn't understand, and I apologize for this, but there seemed to be a larger rate increase for the residents rather than the hotels and motels. And they're coming to find out there's about 28 million tourists that hit this area that are using all these lines and sewage, and there's a difference between gray water and sewage. And so, I don't know, when I go on vacation, I eat a lot, and I shower a lot. And I didn't quite understand why the distribution was higher for the residents than hotels and motels, and why these costs in the city for infrastructure aren't somehow being passed on more to the tourists than the residents.
So, yeah, I can speak to, we have various customer classes on the sewer side and also the water side. And as part of this rate study, and this is one of the reasons why it is so expensive, and it's really an area of expertise that we need to go to a consultant for, is he looks at each one of those customer classes. On the sewer side, for example, he looks at how much sewage is generated, what's the strength of that sewage, what does that cost to treat. That'll be different if you're a business, a dry cleaners, for example, versus a single-family dwelling. There's no distinction, between a single-family dwelling, whether that's a permanent residence, or if that's a second home, or if that's a vacation rental. Currently, we don't have a way to figure that out. We're just viewing single-family dwellings as the same type of customer class, using the same type of water and generating the same generally type of sewage. Now, if you use more water, you're going to be paying more. The sewage is based on how many bathroom connections you have.
Okay.
To answer your question, I think more closely is by this whole California state law, Proposition 218, we are not allowed to say have the motels and restaurants pay a higher rate than we are other classes of customers. I get this right here, Gary? In other words, you're saying I'll go back to say, you're saying we got all these tourists coming in, let's kind of shift some of the burden over onto them.
Road repair.
Unfortunately, what I've been told by our experts that look into all this is we are not allowed to do that.
It's not based upon whether these people are tourists or permanent residents. It's on the customer class, and each customer class is evaluated to how much demand do they put on the system and what is the cost to provide that service. So each customer class is looked at separately. And what you were mentioned in your question, why is that now somewhat different between the different customer classes? Well, as new data is developed, the rate consultants goes back in and adjusts them. As they're not usually big adjustments, but to make them balance out so that each customer class is paying their proportionate share of the total pie. And that's why you see a little bit different between customer classes.
Yeah, maybe it has to do with, once you're looking at the meter numbers, but a hotel of 15 people that look full all the time, to me, I don't understand how they can have less than my family of 4.
Well, that is accounted for in this study.
Yeah, and that's what you're saying,
It's my
how you adjusted those rates?
It is, and the adjustment that you're referring to, that Gary is referring to, is a one-time adjustment. It's done in the first year of the 5-year period, and then the succeeding 4 years, the adjustment, the rate increase per year is exactly the same to every customer class.
Yeah, and that leads to my last 2 questions. One is there any way to ease that and spread that over a longer period of time? Because that's John at the last meeting estimated the increase that first year was pretty phenomenal. And so I'm wondering if the cost could be spread out even, a little more digestible for the residents, if that's possible to put on the decision-making block.
We actually, as a board, asked that same question because we weren't comfortable with that. And then once again, we were advised that under the constraints of the Proposition 218 process, we could not continue an inequitable, what we knew was an inequitable distribution for a stretch of a period of time.
Interest and
Right.
all that, that's how it all works.
Did I get that right, Gary? Okay.
And work with the rate consultant. I mean, you asked them all these things. We're looking at, we're most concerned, I would say, about our family homes and the rates that they're paying and looking for ways to reduce the burden
people are moving
on that.
out. You're going to have hotels left. But my last question was, I understood that it was addressed, and I'm sorry if I don't know it specifically, in 2016 or 2017, the whole basin, for the sake of saving the lake and keeping it clean and all the things, all the efforts that you are making with this decision, there was federal funds available. Are any of those available
Is it the Tahoe Restoration
apply to
Act?
this? I believe so, yeah.
So, speak a little bit about the Tahoe Restoration Act, and Shannon's probably, Shannon, would you like to speak to that?
Sure, I'd love to. So, a few years ago, I'm sorry, Shannon Catula,
No, that's
the general
okay.
manager. A few years ago, Congress passed the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act, actually a renewal of the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act, and in there is authorization for, I believe it's $416 million over 7 years to be distributed to Tahoe.
Yes.
That is, unfortunately, that is an authorization. It doesn't obligate them to give us that money. So the monies that have come in under the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act, and I can't quote you exactly what the dollar amounts are off the top of my head, but the monies that have come in have been very focused on invasive species prevention and forest health and forest management. So none of that money that has come in through the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act has come to the water suppliers or for water or sewer infrastructure. None of that has been distributed to the water sewer agencies. We've lobbied for that. It is eligible underneath the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act. It's the water and sewer agencies, really the water agencies all around the basin, so Nevada and California agencies. There is a slice of that $400+ million that can come to us as water and sewer agencies. The first 5 projects that were identified were not in South Lake Tahoe, although one of them was in the Lucan service area, so not in South Tahoe PUD's service area, but in the Lucan service area for a project. And so if we lobby every year to try and get that money to come to Tahoe, and we've been successful with portions of it, but we haven't been able to bring money for water services. And even though we have it, we're able to go after that money. We have an authorization, but we haven't been successful of actually getting them to write the check to us yet. We continue to pursue that money consistently every year. We actually have some hope that with we had some legislative changes with how the Forest Service is funded, and we think there's an opportunity for money to come through that process to us to be able to implement some of those projects and use.
Will that be able to be folded into your plan when it does
Absolutely.
become available,
Yeah.
and maybe ease the rate increase?
Yes, and I would say for the past decade, really since the Angora fire, South Tahoe PUD has led an effort around the basin called the Lake Tahoe Fire Partnership that has brought in and has accomplished about $47 million worth of fire infrastructure in the basin. So we're talking about tanks and fire hydrants and water line replacements and upsizings and booster stations. And we continue every year to lobby for those funds from the federal government. And those, when those monies come in, we don't plan for those money. That money we don't know if that grant money is going to be there, so we can't really plan for it. But when it comes in, it frees up money in the budget to be used for other water line projects. Our needs kind of far outweigh what is already in the plan.
What year was that as restoration?
The Lake Tahoe Restoration Act, I believe you were correct, it was passed in 2015, but that's off the top of my head. I can get that information up for you. That's specific.
I just wanted to know.
It's the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act, and it was passed underneath the WRDA bill, Water Resources Development for America bill. It was a portion of that bill, but if you search for Lake Tahoe Restoration Act, TRTA, because of the invasive species and the environmental projects that are funded underneath that, has quite a bit of information on their website about that program.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
And that's just one source of funds that we're pursuing on the federal and state level. And we have actually our own grants department here at the district. And if I look back the last 16 years, we've been successful in obtaining about $70 million in low-interest loans and grants over that period of time.
How can we find out the results when some people have not had an opportunity to vote on their slip, what the yays or nays are for this increase?
That's coming up later in Tim's presentation.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, yes, sir. Good afternoon. Hi, my name is Frank Papandrea, and I wanted to just start off by commending the board and the staff here at STPD that you guys do an outstanding job of keeping the water and sewer flowing, and your customer service and your responses to emergencies are always spot on, so thank you for that. I would like to oppose the rate increase. I'm not sure where this is supposed to go, but I want it to be counted. So I just have a few comments, not really any questions. After your rates going up for the last 5 years and now being notified of another 5 years in similar costs, similar increases, it is quite difficult to digest for myself and my family. I have a young family and I have a kid in daycare, and my daycare bill is going up 10% in July. That's about $150 a month, and my pay is not going up that much. So it's not keeping up with the increases we're seeing both on the, living expenses, the utilities continue to rise as Liberty Utilities continues to go up and will go up even more. And, I would love to see, it sounds like as a special district, you don't fall into the CPUC requirements where Liberty Utilities can charge a second homeowner higher utility electric costs, and it doesn't sound like that's possible. I wish it was, because I think that would maybe ease the burden, and maybe your increase could be half for full-time residents and a little more for second homeowners that might be able to afford that. And then also on your process with the paper, you've got to get with the times and have a link with a button that you click and it emails you guys this paper thing. You're not going to get enough responses to mitigate this or make a difference. So I think your process needs to be digitized with the current state of affairs, and that would be my recommendation. But I do oppose the rate increase, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you for your input. Does the 218 process require a mail-in or a physical ballot like this? Do they make any provisions that you could do in electronic?
Off the top of my head, I don't believe they provide for a electronic process.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Hi. My name is Joe Carter. I live in the basin as well. I would like the last person has said, last 5 years we've had a rate increase of about 4 to 5%, and now we're looking at another over a 5-year period about 28%. I too, want a fixed budget and fixed income, and I'm kind of worried about being able to stay where I'm at now. I just received my insurance for homeowners insurance, and if you will get yours, you'll be finding out that we're in a fire district and a fire problem. So that means that they're looking at $200 to maybe $3,000 increase in our cost for insurance for living out here. Plus the cost of living out here is getting more and more expensive, like the man just said. I'm hoping that the board will consider maybe not extending to 5% per year. Maybe they can look at something a little bit less. But I don't want to see us retirees get to a point that we can't live here anymore. And with all the utilities asking for more money, all the gas companies asking for more money, everybody's got their hand out. I don't receive those kind of increases. So it's just a matter of time before I have to make a decision. And I don't like that kind of pressure. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said. Mr. Kurtzweiler. You cannot be anonymous.
No, I can't. I'm a legend in my own mind. Good afternoon. I just have a question and a comment on the answer to the question, is that if you're going to be using this money for the rate increase, and that is going to improve our infrastructure, and part of that infrastructure is going to be increasing the water flow for the fire suppression and fire hydrants, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. What is the pressure required for a fire hydrant to be in compliance?
It's actually flow is what the fire department talks about. And what's the minimum?
I could talk to about some goals. At the fire department, they've adopted a code that's looking at 1,000 gallons for a residential area, 1,000 gallons per minute for 2 hours, and having a hydrant every 500 feet so that your property is within 250 feet of a hydrant, for example. So we look at all of our hydrants. We look at our entire system. There's some areas in our system that actually have no hydrants. These are old systems. They have 2-inch, 3-inch, 4-inch water lines and no hydrants. If they had a hydrant, you'd maybe get nothing, 200 gallons per minute out of them. So we have about 2,000 hydrants in our system, and we have, as part of the projects we're looking at in the next 10 years, installing about 100,000 linear feet of new water lines, and along with that, about 200 new hydrants. So that corresponds to about 10% of our service area that would be improved. So it would take hydrants. Right now, our goal is to meet 750 gallons per minute for 2 hours and having a hydrant every 500 feet. If you ask, you know, I guess boots on the ground, and we've had some recent examples of this. You know, how does a fire department fight a fire, fight a residential fire? It'll show up with a water tender, and in nearly every circumstance, that fire is put out with that mobile tender unit. As they mobilize, they will connect to hydrants and utilize that hydrant water, you know, if the fire persists, to keep it from getting out of hand. So there's substantial improvements in this planned program for those improvements for the community.
Okay. That brings me to the next point of spending money to increase the water flow for the fire hydrants, when as soon as you get up to 1,000, you're going to be spending money to increase the water flow from 600 right now to 1,000. And I don't see where that money actually should be spent to do that, because you may increase that, and you may spend the money to increase that flow. But once a fire truck shows up to that fire hydrant to put out that fire and hooks up his hose, the maximum that they can do in output is 650 gallons per minute. So what you're doing is you are raising the output for the hydrant, then you're lowering it as soon as you hook up the truck to it. So it's kind of like a waste of money to increase the flow when the flow of the fire truck is only 650. Now that's the output. The input in order to suck the water into the fire hydrant or the water tanker is still only 650 gallons per minute. So you're spending money to increase the water flow for the fire department when the first thing the fire department does is go in and decrease that water flow.
There's a restrictor on it.
There's a restrictor on it. So what I'm looking at is, if you're going to raise the rates, which I oppose also, if you're going to raise the rates and spend the money, do not spend the money to increase the water flow, because all you're doing is it's a pipe dream. You're increasing the water flow in order to decrease the water flow on the fire trucks. Now, I've been told by the fire department that we always send 2 trucks. That way we can hook up and then we'll have 1,700 gallons. In the 42 years that I've been here, I've only seen a couple of times where possibly they send 2 trucks. We don't have the infrastructure to send 2 trucks to every structure fire. So if you're going to raise the rates, I want you to I would like to see, personally my own opinion, take the money out to being spent to increase the water flow for the fire department. Because like I said, all you're doing is they're just decreasing. So it's kind of like a waste of money.
Sure, I understand your point. You use the 650 gallons per minute restriction. Right now, we have ours set at 750 gallons per minute, just as our engineering goal to identify those areas of town that are in need of improvement. So we're looking at areas of town that have something less than 750 gallons per minute, and a lot of those, at least half that area has less than 500 gallons per minute, I would estimate. So we are working with Lake Valley and the city. We are looking at, we don't want to just blindly install these projects. If we install a new project, we take it to the new standard, 1,000 gallons per minute. But we're not, right now there's no projects that are taking anything from 750 to 1,000 gallons per minute. So as a first cut, we're only focusing on those areas of town that have 750 gallons per minute or less.
Okay, then maybe it's time to lower the standards to match what the fire department has, because you cannot put 6 gallons of water in a 5-gallon bucket. It just can't be done. So maybe the standards need to be lower.
And we're actively working with the fire districts on that formula.
Okay, thank you.
There's a couple other things I'd like to mention about the fire capacity at the hydrants. It's really important for members of the community to fully understand. The first, I would say that it goes back to what an earlier commenter raised about fire insurance rates. And the board did an excellent job, Shannon spearheaded that movement, to look at the implications of your home not being within a certain distance to a hydrant that meets certain outputs criteria. You know, we're a small utility district here. The ability for us to influence fire code at the state and national level is very, very problematic, as I'm sure you understand. So if you don't have a hydrant that meets your capacity needs per the fire code, there's going to be implications to your insurance rates. In addition to that, something else to consider is that building departments throughout California have been making this move, and what the move is that when you go through your planning and building department approval process, you're going to have to demonstrate that the hydrant by your house, both in terms of proximity and flow, meets those requirements. If not, you either cannot do your project, or you're going to be held responsible to upgrade the system to meet those flows. I mean, this has a ripple effect throughout our economy. Fundamentally, this is going to impact contractors, landscapers, so on and so forth, because the areas of our community, which is approximately 10%, do not have adequate fire flow, will be precluded from doing large-scale home redevelopment projects. And that's not even to mention the importance of having an interconnected fire infrastructure system. And so whereas, you know, I greatly appreciate Kenny's comments, to some degree we are beholden to things greater than us. We are meeting those requirements, and we are doing those in the greatest effort possible in a cost-efficient manner to be able to keep your fire insurance rates low, which I promise you those rate increases will be substantially more than we're proposing today, and also ensure that you have the flexibility in years to come to remodel and change your homes, where today if you live in those areas and that 10% that do not have it, that opportunity is in jeopardy. So we looked at these things holistically before we came forward with the fire infrastructure approach to this budget process.
Yeah, much of that area has no hydrants whatsoever. So that's a big problem. And when I mentioned the 100,000 linear feet of water lines included in the 10-year plan, those lines are needed to meet certain levels of fire flow, but this is also really the worst parts of our water system. It's the oldest lines, it's the smallest lines, it's the most leaky lines. Really should be replaced in the next 10 years anyway.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I think you're incorrect, Mr. Exline. I don't know what insurance company you deal with, but I deal with a number of insurance companies. They don't measure the rates based on the proximity to a fire hydrant.
I do planning work across the state of California.
I just went through a debate with an insurance company that required I be within a certain distance to a fire station. As a result of the closure of the fire station in Tahoe, all of the rates in that entire subdivision increased because of the fact that they were more than 2 miles from a fire station. So let's correct that. Now let me just address overall the rates. I think I've made my case at the last hearing that we had. And I'm going to state unequivocally that the community needs a respite from rate increases. When you calculate the rate increases for water and sewer for the last 5 years, both those rates increased 30% plus. That's a pretty big chunk out of the community. I understand you've got financial obligations to maintain the system, but tell me, or at least describe to me, in relation to the sewer, the condition of the sewer system, what do you have on the drawing board as far as improvements to the sewer system that are immediately necessitated? What is something that's pressing?
On the sewer collection system?
On the sewer collection system, because this is all related to the age of the system and the fact that it needs some replacement or at least upgrades. So.
Sure. We actually have a project we're designing right now to replace a sewer line in Myers that is completely failed. And we've actually, the bottom 1/3 of the pipe is gone, it's missing. So that's one immediate example. What we've done in our 10-year plan, last year we looked at about 10% of our entire sewer collection system. And we got some new TV equipment, we did a video inspection, of about, again, 10% of 312 miles of sewer system. And on that video, we saw some pipes that showed some delamination. We showed some pipes that had inflow due to cracks or failures at joints. We saw a lot of pitting. So based on what we saw last year as a percentage of that 10%, we projected over our entire system. And based on that projection, in the next 10 years, we're planning to replace or reline 4% of our sewer collection system. So, and our thoughts to expand on that, we have a couple of immediate examples like Tahoe keys that failed. We just recently found and repaired a section on Emerald Road in the Keys that had an inflow problem. And if we didn't repair that right away, that can cause a sinkhole and a massive emergency and costly emergency repair. And then I mentioned the failure that we have out in Myers. So those are some immediate emergency examples. What we're really trying to do as part of this program is look ahead and make a risk assessment based on our condition assessments and do these repairs in time. Make repairs, line sewer pipes before they fail entirely. If we can line our pipes before they fail, it's going to cost less than $150 per linear foot. If we wait until they fail, it's going to be $450, $500 per linear foot or more. If you remember that repair we did in early 2017 at the Tahoe Keys, we had a sinkhole, we had a sewer that failed. That little repair cost $400,000. If we would have found that earlier and been able to line that pipe, it would have been something, I think, more like $40,000. So do we have a lot of immediate failures? I just gave you 3 examples. But really, we need to spend some money now to prevent those catastrophic emergency projects in the near future.
So you're suggesting that the entire system needs to be relined?
1.5% in the next 10 years. It needs to be relined, I believe is our estimate. I will give you we have an estimate for replacement. We have areas in our system that have sags in the line, so that the sewer line kind of goes up and down, not the way you want to install and operate a sewer. How much of a problem those are, we have yet to determine. But we have areas in our system that need immediate repairs so that we don't have catastrophic failures. And I believe our estimate is 1.5% of our system to be relined in the next 10 years. And this 5-year plan gets us on that path. Julie?
The 1.5% is how much of our system we anticipate will need a complete replacement because it has sags.
Okay.
The number for relining is actually quite a lot higher than that, but I don't remember off the top of my head exactly what that number is.
I feel like 2.5% in my slide.
I think it's somewhere closer to 5% of the system in the next 10 years would be relined.
So essentially what you're saying, based on the condition of the system in various areas of the community, once you undertake this whole process, you're essentially raising the rates for the entire 5 years. In spite of the fact that you have to revisit the issue every year, it's a foregone conclusion that you're going to raise rates every year for the next 5 years.
So we will make these incremental improvements and continue to look at our system constantly, every year, continuously, to see if our estimates are correct, see if we're making repairs fast enough or not fast enough, and make adjustments on an annual basis based on the data that comes back to us by looking at our system. But every year we will revisit our project priorities and reassess what rate increases, if any, are required to maintain our projected spending levels. And every May we'll be back here, the board will be back here to discuss and make the annual rate increases on a year-by-year basis. So this 5-year Prop 218 just sets the maximum possible rate increases per year.
Well, it'll become nothing more than a certain ministerial act. You'll just, with new faces sitting there, they'll hear the same discussion, and once again, it'll be a rate increase every year for the next 5. And then, of course, beyond that, even So, and I'm not suggesting that you resist any repairs. They have to be done, obviously. And that's not the point. The point is, do you have a dollar amount of what those repairs would cost based on the condition of the system today?
We do. I'll have to get that number to you. It's based on the percentages that Julie mentioned. But based on what we saw last year, we have relining and replacement projects scheduled for the next 10 years based on that condition assessment. So it's based on actual data and an assessment of the pipe condition that we obtained last year. But every year we'll continue to look at another 10 to 15, 20% of our system perhaps, and to see if we're making these repairs fast enough, or if we can slow down. You know, how good was our estimate based on what we saw last year? And every year that's a continuous process. And when we come to the board, we will give them the current data. So, at the end of this year, we'll have looked at perhaps another 10% of our sewer system, and we'll take a look at what we saw last year, what we looked at this year. We'll make an assessment on pipe repairs and replacements and see if we need more or less money based on that data.
Thank you. I hope you guys are enjoying this. I know sometimes the details of what we do here is not the most exciting in the world, but through these series of questions, I think a lot of good information is coming out. So I hope it's worth you guys, and we welcome more questions if anybody else wants to come up. Yes.
My name's Sue, and I have a couple questions because we're one of the areas that got metered first a few years ago. And we have a pretty good sized lot in this section of town we live in, and most of it's natural, but nonetheless, what I'm looking at, well, first of all, I just wanted to hear 100% of South Lake Tahoe city residents will be metered by the end of this year. Is that true?
By the end of 2020.
And then you guys said that the increases in the sewer were going to be 5% and the water was 6%. And I'm looking at the rate increases, just current to the 1920 fiscal year on the sheet that you sent everybody. And I mean, I can do pretty good math in my head, but most of these rate increases look like they're way more than 5 and 6%. And the difference in the meter, if I'm understanding this paper correctly, first of all, we live in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house, and we still get charged the base rate for somebody that lives in a 3-bedroom, 3-bath house, I think, which isn't really fair. There's 2 of us. We're gone half the time. We're still being charged 1,500 cubic feet of water. I can't even imagine that we can even use that even when we're watering our yard, let alone when we're only here 3 weeks out of the month over the last 6 or 8 months. So I'm agreeing with all of these folks that say the rates are too high. I think it's unfair that people with really small homes are getting billed at a flat rate, the base rate, of people who have much larger homes with larger families. I've always been pretty conservative with my water usage with New Bay for years, and went through many drought situations. But to me, it looks like the rates that you listed here are way higher than this 5 and 6% per year. And it also looks like the people who are metered, if this gray box is the metered folks' sewer and water, if you add just the current usage for the smallest, the 3/4, which is what we are, it's $295, whatever, 54/4. For people who aren't metered on the same size, so they're not getting billed for whatever water usage they're using, and their sewer, it's like $178 approximately, or 223 of it, sorry. I'm just reading mine. So the metered people, on the smallest amount of meters, the smallest number possible amount of water we can use, we're still at this, based on this, unless I'm reading this wrong, for a quarter, we're still paying $72 more than the people who aren't metered that are using as much water as they want. And we're not even in droughts anymore, and we're on our wells. So, I mean, we almost don't fit with the California drought situation, but I just think there's really an unfair playing field for people with smaller homes. And those of us that are all on fixed incomes with Social Security, again, I'm agreeing with all those people, all of our bills are going up and up and up, and we're not getting that kind of pay. You know, and we disagree with the rate increase. And, you know, I sent a letter in to you guys to explain the situation. But if you can even explain how these numbers relate to a 5 to 6% increase, that would help, at least in my head.
All you want to address is there's a couple of things. One is how the percentages work, and two is this fixed versus metered cost. If you would address that question.
Yes. Two things are going on here. The first one is that the rate increases, the percentage increases that are being discussed, is the percentage district-wide that's being proposed. So it's lumping all customers together and saying, okay, the revenue generated by those customers are going to increase 6% or 5% on the sewer side, for example. The first year of this 5-year schedule, you'll remember earlier on in the discussion we talked about the cost of service adjustment that the rate consultant said we had to do according to Prop 218. And that adjustment, so that first year adjustment is different for every customer class. And the required adjustment for the residential customers in year 1 is actually an 8.2% increase versus the 6% increase. And then in year 2, if the board wanted to adjust the maximum rate possible, it would just be 6% for every customer class after that.
So the residential people basically were still paying more than what your 5% or whatever, regardless of whatever anybody else is paying, whether we're metered or not metered.
Yes, the residential increase in the first year based on that 6% scenario is 8.2%.
Is there any salvation for those of us with small homes that use relatively small amounts of water to not be spent at the base? And I addressed this many years ago when we moved in, when some of the rates started going up, and you know, it's like we're paying for these huge homes that are going up in our neighborhood that are 2-story, 4 or 5 bedrooms and 3 baths, and yes, they probably have a bigger meter, but nonetheless, it feels like we're just getting squeezed. We're getting squeezed from a lot of different directions, and I mean, we can let our entire yard just go to pine needles and dust, but we did have some pride in our yard for a while.
I understand what you're saying. The district's fixed costs for our systems is anywhere between 80 and 85%, and that's why 5 or 6 years ago, the board actually took action to raise the base up to match that fixed percentage of our costs, and they lowered the consumption cost, which is the cost of actually using the water.
Right, we saw that. We were happy with at least that piece going down, but it's back up, and now next year looks like it's going up 50 cents per 100 cubic feet. That's a huge rate increase from $1.09 this year to $1.50.
The overall increase, though, is 8.2% in the first year.
Well, how's it from $1.09 to $1.58 per 100?
They combine the entire metered rate when you combine the base and the consumptive rate and the amount of usage that you have. If you're an average customer that uses between 25 and 2,600 cubic feet of water, your bill will increase 8.2%. And that's also if you look at the unmetered rate, which I think we only have about 1,000 more people on at this time. The undermetered rate, if you look at the change, the year-to-year change is exactly 8.2%.
Why is it such a huge percentage increase that first year? Does it have to do, like you explained in the meeting that month ago, how the city is required to pay back the loan in a timely manner?
And when you say the huge, are you talking about the 8.2%?
Yeah, that's first year. Everybody's really having to swallow that.
Exactly. And no, it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the cost of service adjustment. It was the rate consultant had to look at the cost of providing service to each customer class and determine exactly how much it costs to provide that service to that customer class. And based on that information, there was a 1-year adjustment that had to be made to make sure that each customer class is being treated equitably. And that's why in the following 4 years, like I said, if the board chooses to raise rates during the following 4 years, it would be the exact same percentage for every customer class after that.
Right after Ken, okay? Or two. The question that I have as far as the meters go, does South Tahoe Public Utility District, stay stupid, do they pay for the water that they pull out of the ground? Does that cost you any money to buy the water that comes out of the ground, that goes through the pumps, that comes to our house?
Well, I know you know the answer to that, Ken, but I'll answer it for the staff. The groundwater that we pump out is groundwater. We own the rights to it, and so the money it costs to get that out of the ground is the infrastructure required to get it out of the ground, plus the electricity and maintenance required to get it out of the ground.
Okay.
And so that's our fixed cost, and it's about 82% of our entire system cost is that infrastructure cost.
Utility-wide, including gas companies, electric companies, is that a normal 82%?
I don't know about other.
I would say no. I mean, like the electrical company, most of their fixed costs are much less.
Okay.
And the variable costs, you use power, you can buy fuel or, develop that power. So their fixed costs are much less than ours.
Okay, when I have a meter, I had one when I put in my house. So I also have a gas meter. When I do not collect any gas or I'm not using any gas, I'm not charged. And I'm not charged the base rate. When my electrical power goes out, my electricity goes out, I'm on a meter. I'm not charged any rate for infrastructure costs, base rate, or anything to do. I don't pay for electricity that I don't use. If my meter's not running, I'm not paying for electricity, and the base rate is $11.
Okay, there is a base rate.
Yes, there is a base rate, it's $11. Yet, when I'm not using water, I'm still paying for it. Can you explain why this utility company is the only utility company that charges me for something that I don't use?
You're not looking at it right, Kenny.
Okay, then, can you explain to me how to look at it?
I think a really important thing is, and this was interesting when I was running for the board in 16 and 18, and this is a really interesting point that Kenny brought up, because I thought, what are they doing to the people of South Tahoe? What's going on here? How can I use this in my campaign? But unfortunately, what I found out is that the board before me actually was incredibly wise in that decision to set the fixed rate so high. And the reason being is that so few people live here year round. Because if they didn't set the fixed rate as high as they did and the variable rate as small as they did, everyone in this room, to some degree, would be subsidizing vacation home rentals. Not to the same degree, because what would be happening right now is your consumptive rate would go up dramatically. If you have a lawn, if you have infrastructure, irrigation, all these things. But the vacation home rental, it just has pine needles, and people are not there 7-8 months out of the year that's not being rented, they're not paying anything. And so to keep this massive fixed cost infrastructure system up and running, you'd be subsidizing them to have their house sitting vacant while they're generating income from a community that they don't live in. And that's why the board made the decision that they did years ago. I think it was a wise decision. It was unfortunate, but given the realities of South Lake Tahoe, our economy, and how our built environment works, I don't think they had another option. I leave it to the board members that were on the board at that time to speak to it. But that's how they developed the system, because when I heard this, I was exactly like you. But after kind of peeling off the layers of the onion, it was the only reasonable decision that staff and the board could have made at that time.
So everything's based on the infrastructure costs. So if the gas company and the power company infrastructure costs are a lot lower, is there anything you can do rather than raise rates to lower the infrastructure costs to match the industry standard, which is less than
the 82% that you did. So is there any way you could lower the infrastructure costs without raising rates to keep up to that 82% infrastructure cost? Because you've got a fixed cost on that infrastructure. Okay, the infrastructure's there, it's already there. And you are collecting money from us to maintain that infrastructure. And now you want to raise rates to fix the infrastructure, which I totally get, I understand that. But is there any way to lower the infrastructure costs rather than just to willy-nilly raise rates to bring everything up?
I think so, and I think really by lowering infrastructure costs, I think that's kind of an interesting way to put it. Fundamentally, the cost of everything to do construction is going to become more expensive in the future, and there's nothing we can do about it. This is a global reality, and there's nothing we can do about it. But what we can do, and this is a recent success from the board, innovation and positive thinking, to look to reduce infrastructure costs. So John referenced earlier that there was a project in South Lake Tahoe, or in the Keys, that cost $400,000 as a result of sinkhole. We all know of it. The district staff did incredible work with their camera, innovation, found a similar problem, but instead of the sinkhole and it being $400,000 to fix, they were able to patch it up worth a few $1,000s. This is the world we're trying to operate in. We're trying to collect as much data as possible, and with that, streamline our processes so our fixes are not $400,000, they're $4,000, and to the greatest extent, walk within those margins. But as far as lowering costs to large-scale infrastructure, equipment, time, men, that is not going to be viable going forward.
Okay, because I would challenge you guys to lower the infrastructure costs 5% a year and do not raise our rates 5% a year. And maybe we could have a status quo just for now. And I understand, we need to move forward. But perhaps you could look somewhere within the district to lower your infrastructure costs to become even with the industry standard and not raise our rates 5%. Look within yourselves and look where you can cut corners. Because I own my own business like a lot of people do. I can't just willy-nilly raise my rates. And every time I do a job, the people always are looking to lower their price. They don't look at the services that we provide. They look at just the lower right-hand corner and they go for the lowest price possible. And I understand that. So what I'm asking you guys to do is challenge you guys to lower your costs, like I have to lower my costs all the time and not pass it on to my customers. So lower your costs so you don't have to raise our costs by 5%. Look within yourselves to lower your costs by 5%. Thanks.
There's a problem there, and this is something that we've had to look at a fine balance over the years. We have a certain budget that we have to meet, whether it's salaries or pumping the water or putting pipelines in the ground. If we lower our fixed costs, or infrastructure costs, then we've got to raise the cost of the water itself that's being pumped. And if you really lower that cost and pass it on to raising the cost of the water, a lot of people are going to get hurt if they use water. Another issue is that looking at the value of the water and what we provide is that we're there 24/7 all year round, whether you're there or not, and we can provide water anytime you show up to wash your dishes or flush the toilet. And we're also providing fire water too, and that's there full time. So there's other things than just you using that water to wash your dishes or whatever.
Yeah, I would like to speak to that fixed versus variable costs, 85 fixed, 50% variable. I would say that is the industry standards for water and sewer agencies. We're just far different than a power company, electrical or gas power company. And at 85%, that reflects our actual fixed costs to have a system ready there for you, as Jim suggested, as Jim mentioned. So that's an industry standard, but I would say our rates, you look at our combined water and sewer rates, we're far below the regional average. We looked at a number of agencies around the basin. Your combined water and sewer rates are about 34% less than the average of all the other agencies around the basin. Yes, ma'am.
So
My name is Penny Ware, and I wish I had some answers to some of these questions. I'm here obviously to object to the rate increase. I think the big thing here, and also to thank you, going to the website and looking and being able to, I'm not a super computer person, it was a really user-friendly site to find out about the improvements. It was really helpful. And so I was reading about this Prop 18, and I probably haven't done enough research on that. I guess that took place about 5 years ago, and I'm assuming that's a state prop, it was not a local proposition. So everything is subjective to that.
Yeah, that's a state Proposition 218.
Okay.
It was more than 5 years ago. It was enacted maybe more like 15 years ago, kind of on the heels of Prop 13,
okay.
Property Tax Initiative.
Okay, so all I've seen is my property taxes going up. About 15 years ago, we built a new house here. To get that permitted, it was about $30,000. It included a sewer and public schools and all that kind of stuff. And so it's been, that was 18 years ago, and then we built our house, and that $30,000, I'm wondering where that went. And then our property taxes on a regular basis, where that goes, because that keeps going up as well. So I was kind of concerned about that. So my main objective is to ask, because we're here for our objections, obviously, and I'm so glad you're here to hear us. Hopefully it'll do more than what my husband said. You'll hear us, but you'll still go ahead and do your business. Consider redistribution of the cost. What can we do? Because the tourism is just, it's getting here earlier and earlier every year. It used to come after Memorial Day, but now it's already starting in May. And between the hotels and all that type of influx, there's more tourism than there are actually residents here, and now we're paying for them to come on board and use the hotels and use the vacation rentals and all that. So I'm looking to ask you for just a redistribution to the cost that is not always passed on to the residents, because as always, everything just keeps going up. And 30%, I thought it was pretty reasonable, even with the 34% less than other districts. It seemed like it was reasonable, but now it's just going hand in hand with everything else. I'm not sure how close the STPUD works with the city as far as this is an independent district office is what I'm assuming. And because of that, are you working with the city at all? Are you budgeting with the city? Are you not budgeting with the city? When I see new sidewalks going in and those kinds of things, are you getting a hand of any of that kind of money? So it's actually an independent agency here then?
They are. We coordinate with the city on common projects, like the Sierra Boulevard project.
Right.
We're doing some water and sewer improvements as part of the project. So that's the level of coordination.
But financially, we're completely separate. They would love to be able to siphon some of our money out. They've told us several times. And believe me, you don't want us part of the city.
Yeah, I totally agree and I understand. So thank you for being so reasonable, and thank you for keeping us as informed as possible. But if you could consider the redistribution of the cost of rented residents, that would be great.
And I will speak for just myself in this. When you say that we'll probably just not do what we're going to do, I actually appreciate hearing from all of you, and I am listening.
Thank you for considering that.
So when you talk about redistribution, we're really limited to state law and case law in regards to, our rate structure having to be structured so it represents a fair and equitable distribution of costs based on what it actually costs us to provide that service to the various customer classes. So really our hands are tied in that regard. We follow state law to be fair and equitable in that manner. You talked about connection fees, water and sewer connection fees for a new house. That's your buy-in into our system, which is, as I said, it needs, like your car, like roads, like your house, it needs to be painted, it needs ongoing maintenance and repair improvements, and at some point you just have to build, buy a new car, replace it entirely. So, but right now you have $1.5 billion in assets working for you, and that your connection fees were a buy-in into that system.
Just like to add that as the board was going through this 218 process, the board really worked to try to come up with creative solutions, whether you want to use redistribution or how we can look to make things better for the locals. But each time we came up with what we thought was a great idea, unfortunately, the legal department said, no, you can't do that. So it wasn't for lack of trying. I just really want to make sure everyone understands that, like, I don't think you'd find anyone that would disagree with any of the things being said, but unfortunately, the law just did not allow us to do any of these kind of interesting things that we would like to pursue.
There were some things that we were able to do within the constraints of the state Prop 218 requirements. I mean, initially, if you remember, that first year adjustment was as high as 14%. So if the board enacts that 6% first year rate on the water side, it would mean about an 8.2% increase for the average residential customer. Earlier, that was as high as 14%.
To answer your one question about when Prop 218 was passed, so it is, Proposition 218 was passed in 1996 by the California voters, and it amends the California Constitution. So it's not just legislation that we could go lobby to get changed. We'd have to change the California Constitution in order to change these requirements.
Okay, anybody else has been hit in the back? I saw you first. Well, okay, you're next.
I have a question for you relating to the Indian Orange about the mailing. Why did, you said you had 15,000 billing? How do you get out 15,000?
14,000 water customers.
And you only send out,
18,000 sewer.
you only send out 8,000 mailers. Why?
Well, those are just
Emails. We sent out actual snail mail
Okay, so
to
you
everybody.
did the.
Yeah.
Why didn't you put it with the bill so you don't have to post it?
We also had, I think, some information on the bill about this process. Correct, yeah. I'll link to the website with all the information that's on the actual bill.
But, you know, a lot of people don't want to go to computers.
And they got mail, everybody got a
Right,
piece
but
of
why didn't they
mail.
go in the mail? I mean, you would save 2 birds with one stone, you can just stuck it in there.
So there's information on the bill. There's a separate mailer that went out.
Right.
There's emails that went out if you're registered with email.
Okay,
In
I just
addition
wanted
to
to look
the
at number
radio and
difference,
TV
and
and
I
newspaper
didn't see that
advertisements.
difference. Okay.
Can we respond real quickly? Because her actual question was, why did we send it out separate instead of combining it with the bill to save on postage? It was a timing issue because we had to get the notice out with that minimum 45-day requirement before this meeting today.
And as you know, we only do it quarterly, so
Yeah.
kind of just, yes, sir.
Hi, I have a question. Are the rate increases going to be earmarked specifically for infrastructure improvements, or will they be available for future CalPERS contributions and when the MOU runs out, future employee raises?
Sure.
Can you speak to that, Paul?
Yeah. We have not been directed by the board at this time to specifically earmark it, but what we do know is based on our current level of operating costs, using a 2% annual inflationary adjustment, that during this entire next 10-year process, we would not need to raise rates to pay for our day-to-day costs. And so right now, we intend 100% of that new rate revenue to go towards the infrastructure projects.
Will you put that in writing?
Okay, yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Jim Lasher. Someone made the comment that those mailers look like junk mail. Yes, they did. I had multiple ones. I had, say, one throughout the rest of them. Could you tell me, this process has the response from the public ever stopped the rate increase? Have they ever reached 50%? In this district?
I think in this district, it's never even been close.
I think 8% was the highest.
8%?
Yeah.
No vote under Prop 218, which again was not that much.
I know that the board took it easy on the residents when the economy crashed, it seems to me at that time you did not take out the maximum increases.
We actually had a year, or
There was a number of years.
we had a 0 1 year during that time, and I don't know if we had 2 years, I can't remember. But yeah, yes.
I do appreciate that, and I think if you look at the response and gauge that or index it into what the previous responses are, maybe you could use that to make your decision on how far you do go with the rate increases. And one other thing, I don't go around looking for what the district's doing, but there's, in my neighborhood, there's a couple of things that I see going on. One up at Pioneer Trail and Black Barn. There's a building that the district owns. It used to be a post office. And there was a gate put in there. It's a gate to keep, what is a gate for?
I think that, so some months ago, someone drove a trailer full of trash in there, a quite large trailer full of trash, and just left it on that property, and that then was the cost to deal with that trash became the district's responsibility. And so we fabricated that gate in-house with district staff and installed that with district staff in order to eliminate that from happening in the future.
I think if you run into that someplace else, you could probably do what some of the homeowners do. They make a little sign that says, free take.
It was really trash. I don't think anybody wanted that trash.
You know, I've got some of the same shelving that I saw on that trailer in my garage. It's really good shelving. I got it from the supermarket out of business.
You know, the staff never let me know that was available.
I believe that. Okay, you know, I see that there, and I also see the well at Barbara and Martin. This week they're putting up a new gate there. Are you required to have a gate, national security, homeland security type thing?
I'm not, so that's Martin well, it's actually just a monitoring well at this point. It's high magnesium, so it's not an operating well. Shannon, do you know about, I'm not aware of a new gate going?
I believe that gate got destroyed this winter when somebody skidded across the intersection and took it out, but I'm going to turn it over to Chris Stanley, who's much more knowledgeable than I am about most of this.
We have a lot of problems with people sliding right through that intersection. And yes, it was taken out. Jeremy's crew built another gate in-house, and that's what you probably saw being installed. That's insurance. Yeah, the person who hit it, their insurance company did pay for all the damage. As far as the gates go, myself, I prefer gates up at our facilities because even though it's only a monitoring well or something like that, it still is district property. And if somebody were to go in there and get hurt, climb on the roof, fall off, there's just, in my opinion, a little bit of liability there. So we try to prevent that from a lot of access, people parking there, going for a walk in the meadows, things like that.
Yeah, we need to have access to these sites 24/7, not so much Martin well. But if somebody's parking in there and we can't get to our site, that's a big problem.
I don't understand that. But, I mean, this is a gate, so you can't drive a vehicle. You can walk all the way around. So, I just think some of these things are kind of gold plating in the district, and that's where some of this money goes. I think you should consider, not doing some of that. And that particular gate, I know a couple of years ago it did get wiped out with someone going through the intersection there, and you may have other ways to take care of that, make your access an angled access with boulders there. Boulders are pretty good, selling cars.
And a little cheaper to replace too. Watching.
I mean, they're not free, I try to buy them, they're not free. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Just one more response. We've also unfortunately had quite a few complaints when we don't put in something substantive that has, it is maybe in compliance or has the same character as what the Forest Service puts in on their properties. When we have gates that have problems, we get considerable complaints from the community members about how terrible that stuff looks and go tear that down and get rid of it for us. And so that's one of the reasons that we use the gates and the facilities that we have is because they are in a similar character to what you see on other facilities in the basin. And it's one of the things that drives us to those kind of pieces of infrastructure.
Yeah, keep up with the Joneses, keep up with the Joneses. Thank you.
Interview. Just one more thing, there's been a number of comments about reducing expenses. I thought I might speak a little bit about what the district's done in regards to reducing our operating expenses over time. And just real briefly, if you look at the last 15 years, our operating expenses are actually less today and budgeted for next fiscal year. It's less than we saw 15 years ago. If you look at the consumer price index over that same 15-year period, the CPI has increased 19%. So I think that's a real testament to how we've refined our operation and been more cost effective in the last 15 years especially.
Okay, what I'd like to do, unless somebody's got a burning topic you want to go to, I think we've had a good discussion, but we've also kind of getting a little long here. So I think we kind of want to move ahead with this, Tim, if that's all right with everybody out there. Right, this is still your ball, right, Tim? Okay. We'll get there. Yeah, we'll get there. Tim's going to go through his full. Right.
Everybody else. Does anyone like to turn in any more protests?
There's 3 here.
Anybody else? Okay.
Yes, sir. The previous slide.
We need to officially close the hearing, Randy.
But Tim has to file the last vote before we close it, right, Tim?
No. You'll report on them after you close the hearing.
Okay, so at this point, we're going to close the public hearing, but you can stick around, we will be voting on this. And then Tim will give us a report here, since he is on cyber. And if he starts taking off his shoes and socks right now.
Do we have an engineer help us? Julie, can you do a spreadsheet?
I thought it was computer support, and I'm not good for that.
25, which is going to be and out of that 425, 418, 417 are valid. That's going to be 200. Balance going to be 6.
Yeah.
Protest that we see as of right now, there was 425 sewer protests that were received, 417 of those which were valid protests. And when it comes to a total of 2.28% on the sewer side. On the water side, we had 414 protests received. Out of those, 406 were valid protests, and that's a total of 2.85% of the water customers.
Okay. Thanks, Tim. Like I said, we're alone.
So this is agenda item 7A.
Right.
It's the ordinance to adopt rates. So ordinance 573-19 has been prepared for your consideration. It adopts the 5-year rate schedule for fiscal years 2020 to 2024. And it includes the proposed rates that Tim discussed, up to 5% per year for the sewer fund, up to 6% per year for the water fund. The ordinance is only actually implementing fiscal year 2020 rates. So that's what you're going to be discussing today. The remaining 4 years are considered by the board on an annual basis. Staff recommendation is to adopt ordinance 573-19 as presented. Before you start deliberating, I just want to mention a couple of things. If somebody has a desire to make a motion to adopt the ordinance as presented, you can just read the motion directly off the agenda item. If there's a desire to make a motion to adopt with a different percentage structure in year 2020, you can still read off of the agenda item for the motion, but I will add some additional language after that to account for that. If there's a motion made and it doesn't get a second, then the motion will die and a new motion will have to be made. Or if there's a motion and it does receive a second, but it fails under the voting process, then a motion will have to be made again, and we'll just continue this process until a motion is approved.
Okay, so what I'd like to do now is let's discuss it among the board. Chris, do you want to jump in there first?
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. So now you get to listen to me for a few minutes. Hopefully I can be brief. I want to start by saying that I approve the rate increase. I mean, I disagree with it immensely. Sorry. I did from the beginning. But I want to preface my statement by adding something to that. You know, I've been on the board for 10 years, and the district staff, for the 10 years I've been doing this, possess a giant amount of institutional knowledge. And not once in those 10 years have I ever actually come across a situation that I didn't feel they were doing the most with the money they had. And that comes down to people in the field making repairs or finding ways to do things cheaper. I mean, that goes all the way back to my first day on the board. It was a misconception of mine that that was not the case, but I can say safely that that's what I feel. You know, they pursue every grant opportunity that comes available. They've implemented the asset optimization, which has done a gigantic leap for us in being able to save money now and in the future. And we've approved a lot of equipment for the staff to go out and make some of those assessments. So with that said, I still oppose that rate increase, and I'll tell you why. Now I'm going to start with fire flow. One thing that I think that we have to clarify in fire flow is that it's misleading. Brad Zlendick from Lake Valley came up and he was asked point blank whether or not improved fire flow would prevent a campfire. It will not. Probably could not. Will it save a structure or two in case something like that happened? Yes, most likely. I can't quote exact numbers, but I will say that Kenny wasn't far off because I did a little further digging and found that, first of all, most fires are put out in the 500 gallons that the tender brings to a fire. Not all, but most. Secondly, almost all fire engines, at least in Lake Valley, carry at least 1,200 feet of hose. The reason they do that is because if they have to connect to 2 fire hydrants, they have the ability to do so. And lastly on that, I would say that's pretty much what he stated. You know, the biggest thing with the wildland fire that he brought up to us is that the defensible space is inadequate, and those rules are going to change. I can't speak to insurance, and I won't. However, we do need to replace water lines. They're getting old. We have to do it in 5 years? We probably can't. There's just not enough time in the short building season, even if we have the money, to pull that off. That's my opinion again, so these are all my opinions. The other thing, you know, one of the main reasons I oppose a big rate increase is because we don't have sufficient data to determine what we're going to spend money on. You know, we're getting there with the equipment and the field guys out there assessing the sewer lines and the water lines. We don't know exactly how much we need to spend, but they're getting close. You know, we've been given this term called cathodic protection, which is a way to help extend the life of steel water lines. We don't know if that'll work or not. I mean, maybe the whole system's full of holes and it won't work, but I don't believe that's the case. I think what John or anybody else in the field could confirm is that in some cases they'll find places where the sewer lines have been deteriorating for the last 20 years. And some places they look brand new. But until we know that, I don't want to spend a bunch of money trying to chase something that hasn't happened yet. You know, you elected us, and so somebody said, are we just going to go with whatever we want? Well, you elected us to do a job. You didn't elect us to compromise, you elected us to do the right thing. And so unlike the electricity or the gas company, your voice is heard, right? You can write a letter to the CPUC and you might get a response, and it might not be able to, it might not be effective, but you know, here you came to this meeting, you told us what you thought, we were listening. The last problem I have with this rate increase is the fact that because they had to do the 218 analysis and distribute the proportional cost of service to all customer classes, and when I say that I mean residential, multifamily, commercial, they're not exactly equal. So there's a reset that this proposed rate increase would incorporate, which is essentially 2.2% higher than what that says. So we say 6, and actually for residential customers, 8.2. I don't buy, I mean, I'm not on board with that. So, you know, with that said, I would have to say that my dad, you know, he came up and spoke and said that we need a year off, and I agree we do. Do I think it's proof that we go with no increase? No. My gut tells me we should have 0 this year. But I don't think that would be responsible, and I don't think you elected us to do things like that. So my proposal will be that we cap any residential increase to 3%, okay? 1.5 is considered a hardship, and some of you guys said it's a hardship. 6 is more than a hardship, 4 times more exactly. So I say we cap the residential rate increase at 3%. That would then mean that we would approve a 1% increase because we have to still make up that reset. And then further years out, we would have to vote on that again because obviously we approved the 5-year 218. So no, the rates aren't set every year, and no, we're not going to go to max unless the 3 out of 5 people say so. So I'm just one voice, but that's my opinion, and that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you, Forrest. little levity there. It didn't seem to work, did it? I guess we have a serious issue that we're discussing here. And Nick, you got anything to add?
Yeah, you know, I would say I struggled with the rate increase as well, especially as we went through the process and it became inherently apparent that no creativity to rework the structure to work with the community to keep rates as low as possible was not a reality that we could count on. But the problem is, and I really need everyone to understand this in the audience today, is that all economic costs are realized. It doesn't matter if you pay today, the bill will still come due tomorrow. And so the analogy I would like to give you is this, is that if you hear a leak in the roof of your house, you may not want to deal with it that day. You may not have the bills, you may have other things on your plate, you may not have the money. But I can promise you, if you don't deal with that leak and you come back 6 months later, not only do you have a leak, but you have room drywall, your cost to fix it has become exponentially more expensive than it is now. And so as a result, if a water utility district operates in the exact same manner, if somehow I could give you a pause today and those bills were not going to come due down the future, I would do it in a heartbeat. But that's disingenuous. The bills will come due. The beautiful thing about this 218 process is that if we get this grant money from the Restoration Act, if these new technologies come to fruition and we have a tremendous opportunity to save money, I will vote next year for a pause of 0% if that is what the information is providing me. But to tell you that I can give you a pause and that bill is not going to come due in the future, it's just being dishonest. And so what I want to say is the board came to the 6 and 5% for a compromise effort. And the reason they did it is because of the information provided to the team. Because at the last meeting in which this was discussed, people significant concern as it relates to fire came to this. Members of the fire department came to speak and spoke to the importance of this very issue. And so we have to really come to a conclusion as a community, what are we going to do? And I would submit that if you have a water and sewer system that you're not financing correctly and it opens itself up to systemic failure, you simply do not have a community. And that's what we're up here against. Water is the thing on this earth that makes us unique, without which life does not exist. Granted, it's more expensive and things are going up everywhere, but only one of those things guarantees life. We're not doing this because we won't have all these pet projects. We're doing this to maintain service, to maintain safety, and to make sure you can assume the comfort that your lives appreciate. I heard a speaker say something earlier to the effect of, well, I have small children. But I have small children as well, and what I do know is this, if we don't solve this problem today, that bill will be their bill. And we'll be coming up, or future boards will be coming up, instead of 6%, it's going to be 12%, it's going to be 14%. This is not fear-mongering. I encourage you to Google this when you get home. It's happened across the country. And so whereas I don't want to raise rates, I also, in good conscience, could not go forward with a process or a rate structure that does not ensure the integrity of our water and sewer system and fire protection. And that's why, with several other members of the board, we came to this compromise 6%. It was a struggle to get there. And for this first year, that's why I'll be supporting the 6%. In years to come, as opportunities present themselves, more information comes to light, I will change based on that information. But until that point, I have to go with the best information we have available and the compromise we have reached. And that's why I'm supporting the position that was currently agreed upon or discussed at the board during the 218 process.
Thanks, Nick. Jim?
I've got no problem with this budget. Let me show you something. We have 250 miles of water pipes. A good portion of it is steel pipes. This is a piece that was recently removed in the street. We have a lot of places where we've got patches that have been made every 10 feet or 20 feet. And at some point, the cost of repairing it's going to be greater than the cost of replacing the pipe. So just take a look at this. There's some people I want you to stay around to see these pipes. But we've got these pipes. We've got in the sewer collection system, a lot of our pipes are either steel or asbestos cement, and that's what's caused the 3 incidences that John talked about were on asbestos cement pipes that have a life expectancy of about 50 years. Most of those were put in the 1960s, when the sewer treatment plant was built and the community was sewered. So they're going on 60 years old. Asbestos cement has a life expectancy of about 50 years, and we're on borrowed time now. Way behind because for the last 10 years, we've not raised the rates like we should have to cover capital improvements. This was in the last 5 years, shows what the last 5-year 2018 process produced. We had barely anything in the actual construction in the water system. And the green there is for water meters, which did nothing to improve the existing system. But this is the mindset of the board to go for 10 years with nothing and a big increase in 10 years. Well, who's going to pay for that? And it's going to have to be paid at some point, as Dick said.
Actually, I think in the last 10 years, if you ask Paul, he could probably quote me or correct me. I think our average rate increase was 3.9%. Is that not close to accurate? That's close.
Okay, that's close. But one of the problems is you use for mostly what you have to buy. The consumer price index runs about 2.5% a year. For what we do, which is mostly concrete pipes, the other types of construction things, we use what's called the engineering news record. And because those are more expensive things, that average increase is 3.5% a year. So that wipes out any increases that we've had averaging 3.9. But we have, and we've had discussions on whether it's $1.5 billion worth of infrastructure or $2 billion worth of infrastructure. And either way you look at it, we ought to be spending at least 1% in I want to say, anyway, you should be using about between 1 and 2%. Is the industry standard, is what I wanted to say. It's about 1 to 2%. That'll give you a 50 or 100-year life expectancy. At minimum, we ought to be replacing things at 1%. If we have $1.5 billion worth of improvements, that comes out to about $15 million a year we should be spending on infrastructure. We've been nowhere near that. So we're way behind because of this mindset that the board has had for the last 10 years. I have not voted for the budget for the past 7 or 8 years because I didn't feel that enough money was being spent in that. I've been involved in water projects since I got out of college in the water industry for 51 years now. And I don't want to see what's happened in other communities and actually happened here to happen to us again. Some of you may have been here back in the 70s and 80s when the district was in trouble, and everybody was relying on the fact that we had a tertiary treatment plant, the greatest treatment plant in the world. It had to be taken care of. It wasn't. We had cease and desist orders. And Lawton and TRPA were all over this district. There were a lot of fines, and it was because they had not raised the rates. They thought that they could sit back on their laurels and not put the money into what we needed to do. I think we need more on the order of 9% increase in order to catch up and then start getting ahead, because these costs are going to really start to accelerate in the future as these pipelines start to break more or leak or collapse or just totally fail. We're going to have something later on the agenda. The staff's going to report on a water tank that is failing. And we had planned to put a little money into it to rehab it. That tank's going to cost us $1 million, just the tank. It's probably going to cost another $1 million for engineering and permitting and plumbing, doing the plumbing up there. That's not even in this budget. So we're already behind before we go into the 5-year 218. The same thing happened 5 years ago. We had aeration basins and settling ponds that were failing. We had to get in there. We didn't have the money at that point. We had to put it off for a year, and then we split the project into 2 years, and that we wasted $250,000 right there because we didn't have the money to do what we needed to do right. And we've had several other of these things. When John said that we could have repaired that pipe out in the Keys for $40,000, I think it could have been under $10,000 because the pipe on Emerald Bay Road, Emerald Drive, was repaired for about $6,000, I believe.
From the contractor,
The different
cost we had associated with that.
So, you know, as an engineer, I've been involved in this stuff. I've seen it happen. We need to raise these rates, bare minimum. And the way I look at it, we ought to be building for the future, not stealing from the future. So at this point, I'm like I said, I'm not going to vote for it the way it stands. We're just going to keep going on that slippery slope.
Thanks, Jim. Do you have any input, Kelly?
Yeah, I have some input. I've been a member of this community since 1981. My husband and I own 2 small businesses. I feel I probably know better than anyone on this board, maybe better than anyone in the audience. Tough time. But we do need to be prudent with our assets. I have, ever since I've been on the board, I've always been a proponent of steady, smaller increases, and I feel that way today. I think we have to have, we have to have an increase, and I get it, it hurts, but we can't not have an increase. I don't know if we need to have the 5 and 6% increases, but we need to have incremental increases annually to keep up and to protect these assets that are so important to our community, to the health and welfare of our community. This is a very important job that this district does.
Thanks. I'd like to put out there that along the lines of what Chris said, we have a very good staff. They have a very good asset management program. They identify the assets, they identify the condition of the assets, they identify the risk of the assets, and they identify the importance of the asset to the tenant. And based on that, they develop their 10-year master plan on what should be replaced and when it should be replaced. And I lay that as a predicate to saying that what you heard about how this board has been negligent for the last 10 years and hasn't funded a darn thing is a bunch of rubbish. We have spent so much money and done so many projects over the last 10 years, and it's all good stuff. We have the aeration basin. Yeah, brand new headworks, Luther Pass Pump Station, Diamond Valley Ranch. If you could ask the engineering staff what we've done here, and I had to put out there because I don't want the impression out there among the public that we are negligent in doing our duty and not just throwing money at a problem indiscriminately whether it's needed or not, and that's just not true. So that being said, I agree with Kelly a lot that small, steady increases as opposed to large increases are much easier to take. Zero would be my preference, but I think zero would also be not prudent because we'd be paying catch up later on. I'd have to say this though, if we enact the 6% on the water side, that's not 6% for you folks, that's 8.2% for you folks. And I think that's too much. A huge percentage of this community is below the poverty line or at the poverty line. I don't have the numbers, the staff has the numbers. And Chris mentioned a number earlier. You look at a lot of the state resources and they say anything above 1.5% is an economic hardship. And we're talking 8.2. I'm just not willing to accept that. So for me, if I had to put out this first year, in fact, I'll throw it out as a motion. I don't know exactly how that's going to affect the overall rate, because we're really looking at the overall rate. But I'm saying this: I'm not willing to go above 4% to your average residential customer. Now, if you backfigure that, maybe that's
What about 2?
About 2%
average overall customer class.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good starting point.
The reset's accomplished.
Yeah, and then you got the reset. And then next year, we're going to have more TV work done. We spent a lot of money about this really nice HD TV camera to drive down all our sewer lines to see what shape they're in. We're going to take a look at cathodic protection on the steel lines. We're going to have more investigation on the assets there. If we've got this 218 in place that says every year we can go up 5% on the sewer and 6% on the water, okay? We go low this first year so that we don't kill everybody with an 8.2%. If we get a lot more data in next year, if we have a negative report back from all our assets, then okay, we can consider the maximum. But right now, I just don't feel that we need to go that far yet until we know what we're dealing with, and to not overburden the community.
Oh, like make sure we're all clear, that 2% differential is on the water side.
Right.
On the sewer side, there's just a slight differential between the single-family dwelling customer.
Right,
class.
right. It's pretty.
It's about 0.6.
Yeah. So what's your motion?
Yes, one thing before we get in there, because I just want to make sure, we have some of these figures rolled out. Because if you just look at inflation, right, with this rate increase coupled with other things going on in reality, we'll be taking in less money next year than we did this year for projects, just as a result of inflation and projects and growth and these various different things, right? Am I understanding that correct? And so,
yeah, the ENR again is in that 3.5% per year on average for the past 10 years.
And so, what I'd like to hear from it at this point actually is from folks that know the system the best. Does that pose liabilities? Does that pose direct risk to the community? Is that an answer? We may not know that answer for sure, but what I do know is that when you have an increasing cost liability and you're taking in less money, if we want to talk about running things like a private business, Lord, that's not how you do it. No, you do not increase risk and limit revenue in a private business. What I'm saying to you is this: we need to understand what are the implications of this. These are just numbers thrown out of the air. There's been no analysis. There's been no discussion with staff. We don't know the implications of these things. I know just quick mathematical formulas. We're going to have less money to spend for our problems than we did the year before. How are we going to solve these challenges? Whereas I cannot agree with Mr. Jones in his rate increases, that I do think that causes a detriment. And honestly, I agree with lots of what Randy had said, and Chris and Kelly as well. Like, terrific board members, great folks. It's a matter of, are we making the right decision? All those other things being equal. And so that's why I'd be curious to hear from members of senior staff and get their opinion as to the liabilities this potentially poses to the community.
You want to start, John?
Shannon, go ahead.
Okay. We've discussed this in the past, and we gave some presentations to the board. And I'll just speak for Shannon Kapula, not speaking for John or the rest of the staff, but of great concern to me as an engineer and as a water professional is what's been talked about here is that 50% of our water lines are steel, and those are installed in the 50s and 60s. They are approaching, and in some cases at, the end of their useful life. And in my mind, the proposed rate increases, quite honestly, even at 6% on the water side, are not on the pace to replace those assets in a time frame, in a steady, consistent, measured way. And so going less than that rate puts us in a position where the opportunity for us to replace those in a consistent methodology going forward and catching up or keeping up with the failure rate of those lines, in my opinion, becomes in jeopardy. And so we're basically deferring maintenance and replacement of those assets, and that we will at some point catch up with that cost, and we will bear a higher cost of replacement for those systems in the future. I can't tell you when those dates are going to happen. I can't tell you exactly what those rates need to be. I can't give you the precision that I think would make folks much more comfortable. However, that's my opinion.
Can I say something?
Sure, Joe.
So, for everyone that I don't have a son, but I'm an engineering manager, so I've been very involved in the development of the project plan and the asset management program that's been mentioned throughout the afternoon. I just want to seek a little guidance from the board as sort of a response to your question. If we go with lower rates than the 5 and 6%, because when you look at the plan that we put together, you'll see in the first 2 years it is quite front-loaded. I think we have 7 projects that are anticipated for construction in year 1 and 9 in year 2, or vice versa. But it's an extremely heavy workload in those first 2 years, and that's not because we want the additional burden of having to complete those projects in that time frame. It's from some outside driver. Either we have an extremely deteriorated asset that is demanding attention now, or we have some sort of funding deadline that we're trying to meet. We have some other obligation, like on our meters project. And so you know, if we're not going to fund the full rate in this first year, we're going to need to hear from you which of those projects are we going to defer, because we put them in years 1 and 2 because of these drivers.
I think it's also interesting the next 2 years as well, and I think the board did an exceptional thing with the 2008 crash and freezing the rates then. I think that was an exceptional move by the board then. But we're operating with a great economy. Investments there, you know, people are making higher wages. This is a good economy. If not now, when? Maybe not all people share in that economy, but no, there'll never be a good economy where all people share equally. The point being, by the numbers, this is the best economy we've had in a long time, overall. And so if we can't accept this front-loaded thing with all these realities now, with a good economy, when can we? My thought would be, invest when economy is good, invest when you can get low interest rate loans, invest heavily in those times, and in the times where the economic downturn is sure to come, is going to hit this community, is going to hit our service people, at that point, that's when you look to do 0%. But you don't look to do that measure in a fantastic economy, especially with this asset management problem we have. It's just something to consider.
Julie brought up the question of staffing, really, and what we're going to need to do. The last 5 years, we've had to put off a lot of projects. Staff was essentially doing a triage on our facilities, just like you do in a hospital during a crisis, an emergency, picking the projects that, okay, we can put that off for a couple of years, but these are the things that need to be done. And we're way behind on getting some really critical things done. And like I said, we got another water tank that we're going to have to replace here because it's probably going to collapse. In fact, we've drained the whole tank now, so it's not even in use. But we really have to think about that and staffing the whole thing and getting these things done in a hurry. And it's just scary. And not only the water lines, we've got, how many pump stations do we have? 40-something?
41 sewer pump stations.
Sewer pump stations. And we have what we call the Big Five, which are really the heart of the system, but there are 36 others that are on the order of 50 years old or more. And those need to be rehabbed or rebuilt or taken care of, because they're in trouble too. And like I said, we've been putting too many things off. We've known, this board has known for 10 years that we have 10% of our water system that's inadequate for fire protection and pressure, and nothing has been done on that. No, I shouldn't say nothing, but it's a very small percentage of those lines have been replaced that really need to be updated, upgraded, whatever.
We got about 14,000 linear feet in the last 5 years. Not all of those were our highest priority in terms of fire flow.
A lot of those were where we were putting water meters in, and it was easier to put
like the state streets, they're old water lines, their size.
So, but in the areas that we really need, and it's not just in one area, it's spread all around the community. It's patchwork of systems that were put together 50 and 60 years ago by Globin and Hoffman and a few other people, and they weren't built with the idea that they were supposed to last as long as they have. We found pipes, water pipes out there that have redwood plugs in them. That was the way a lot of things were done. Chris back there, he can tell you about what they find out there. The redwood tends to swell, so if you've got a hole in a water line, it works for a while. But I talked to a friend of mine just 2 days ago that lives up on Glenwood, and he says he's got about 100 feet front on the street there, and he has 8 cuts in the pavement that have been made repairing water lines in the last 10 years or so. So at some point, it keeps saying we've been able to reduce our costs on repair and maintenance, but you can only go so long with doing both cutting maintenance and cutting replacement.
Yeah, some thoughts, Nick. I mean, it's a tough situation, tough decisions. We do understand in our service area, we're a disadvantaged community. Our median household income in our service area is $45,000 household income. Statewide, that number is $70,000. So we are right now at 63% of the state median. So that puts us in what's recognized as a disadvantaged community status. 63%, if that goes down to 60%, that's, we call that an extremely disadvantaged community by state standards. So the board understands that, your staff understands that. That doesn't make our water lines last any longer. That doesn't improve our plant. That alone doesn't keep sewage out of our rivers, out of the lake. So we have to balance our system needs with our rates, with our staff capacity to complete projects. As it stands at 5% and 6%, that's a $150 million investment over 10 years. So it needs kind of that 1% threshold to some degree. So it's a substantial investment and improvement plan as it stands. If you're asking us if we, in that first year of that 10-year plan, if we drop that down to 3 or 4%, what impact that will have. So here's some of the solutions to that. We push projects out beyond 10 years. We reprioritize our projects, especially maybe the fire flow projects. We're taking a look at that. Is our target 750 GPM, or is it 650 or 500? That'll reduce some projects. We have some data gaps that we need to fill. We'll continue to look at low interest loans and grants wherever possible. We need to make sure we're spending enough money in time. That's really my biggest concern. And our biggest data gap, we've only looked at 10% of our sewer system. So that's a concern. Our water system, especially our steel water lines, we have 60% of our 250 miles is steel water lines. We have a lot of questions about the condition of our steel water lines. I look at, Jim brought up the CPI index, 2.5% per year. Our ENR, construction cost index, is, I would say, at least 3.5% per year. I think in Lake Tahoe we're seeing a higher cost of construction than that, but let's say it's 3.5. So it's not exactly apples to apples rates to CPI, to construction cost index, but I'm concerned about anything any rate increase that is less than the engineering news record construction cost index. Now, if we do that in 1 year, it has a limited impact, obviously. If you do that year after year after year, obviously that has, increasing impacts. But the board is revisiting this every year. Every year we'll have a new set of data to make decisions upon. So, I think with that, we've laid out our best guess of what our responsible spending program would be over 10 years. And the 5-year Prop 218 gets us on that path. There is flexibility on the front end, especially this first year, to ease the impact on family homes. So I definitely understand that. I think I would actually support something less that would ease that 8% from the families. But with that, I think the rest of that, the 4 years of the 5-year plan, I think we need to be pretty close to the 5 and 6%.
If we drop that budget down to get to for the first year, I think Brady brings up a very good point actually with what is it, 8.2%?
8.2 is
yeah, it's a big number. I think you bring up valid concerns, and I think Chris actually brought up something very interesting as well. We're in the beginning of the data collection, we're in the midst of the data collection process. So what if, in the last board meeting, what if we try to reach somewhere in the middle that actually raise extent possible to meet the current concerns from staff, and bring it to a spot where we're not at that 8.2%, look to bring it down to the first year, something more reasonable for the single-family homeowners. And then everything else would obviously adjust according to that requirement to the 218 process. You see where I'm going with that?
I like what you're saying.
Yeah, and so it becomes a matter at that point then, well, what can we get the first year? What would be agreeable to staff, take into account the, I'm sort of throwing out figures and they're all getting jumbled now, but take into account inflation, all these other things that have been referenced. What is that appropriate amount? What is it you would consider?
You just heard John say that, this first year we could look at something a little different. I threw out the number of a pretty low number as a starting point. But I think a lot of the information has been sold on the 6% thing, right? And I just can't see going above that for the residential side, right?
I think that makes sense. So what if we did the structure the first year at 6%, and so that everything else would adjust accordingly, and I'll leave these lovely folks since I was filling those gaps. But like you said, because the information's already been out there, and people don't, 8.2%, what is this? And then next year we revisit to have this conversation to see where are we? Ideally the data collection is incredibly favorable to us. So next year we can do a lower percentage, probably more akin to something Chris would want to see. I don't know if we're ever going to get up to Jim, but point being, try to find that middle ground where we're addressing, making sure we're keeping consistency, not crippling the staff into a hardship opportunity, not having large-scale failures that are going to be more expensive, but making something work for the community. And I think if we look at things in that context, we can find a good space. So, what I would be in favor of that this first year is having it 6%, so the residential will be capped at 6%, which means commercial.
About 4. So that would result in an average of 4%. That first year for single family would be 6% on the water side.
That's what I mean, yes. That's what I'm saying. So everything else would be less. Commercial would be less, everything else would be less. And the residential would be at that 6. That would have been kind of as it was described throughout the 218 process.
I believe, yeah, single family was the highest. Correct.
I second that motion.
So with that is that the motion for a 6% on water and a 6% on sewer for the remaining 4 years of the Prop 218 process. Is the motion that in the remaining 4 years of the Prop 218, it would be at the maximum rate would be 6% and 5% for sewer, with the first year being this 4%.
Right. I'll read the motion, so it's a complete motion. So the next motion is enact ordinance number 573-19, an amendment to the South Tahoe Public Utility District Ordinance number 464, and superseding water and sewer rate ordinance number 557-14 in its entirety, and incorporating a 4% water rate, a 4% district-wide water rate increase and a 5% district-wide sewer rate increase into year 2020 of the 5-year rate schedule.
I just make sure I understand. So for that first year for single family, the water would be 6%, and the sewer would be 5.6%. To address water first.
Well, he's got it all in one motion.
It's all one ordinance.
Okay.
It's all in one ordinance. What do you guys think about on the sewer side?
The sewer actually, although I don't like the 5% increase, as it kind of goes to the data collection model, that one is, we went through the process, that one seems to be, I think Chris is.
The big five's in there too, right?
Yeah, and so that.
See, that's what I say, I think that the sewer side is more hard data driven, as opposed to elective surgery.
It is a projection based on what we've seen in this sampling of the system that we've inspected. And we will certainly bring to you every year that projection, a revised projection based on additional information that we collect every year.
So, Paul read the motion, did we have a so moved on that? Nick moved it. It's more than I wanted to raise the rates. I listened to the people that came up here. John had some really depressing data about the income level in our community, and that really is going to hit that section of the population hard. But I'm also been reading this board for the last 6 months through this process and through today, and I think that this might be the lowest that we could possibly get through. So I am going to reluctantly second the motion.
One discussion.
Sure.
I just think this is a big mistake. We're going further downhill. I'm concerned about the long-term financial health of this district. I went through trying to clean up after the problems back in the 70s, and that was not easy, and I can just see this happening again. So, like I said, I cannot support it, and I think this is going to be a discussion in the community over the next year or so, and outside of this board meeting. I think a lot of people out there realize the problem that we're approaching.
Okay, Kelly.
I would just like to say that I appreciate that for the most part, this board tries to collaborate and to work together and to do things that maybe, like Randy said, it's a little higher than I wanted to go, but I feel for the greater good that this is what we're going to do. And I appreciate that. I appreciate the board members that think that way. And I agree with the motion.
Well, let's give it a run and see if it flies. Okay, skin of its teeth, 3-2. So there you have it, staff. Now we can discuss about what you can get done and what you can't get done. We'll build everything we can build. And I really want to thank all the public for showing up and giving your input. I realized that the outcome wasn't what a lot of you wanted, but I hope you saw that the difficult process we as board members have and all the factors we have to weigh.
And that no one takes it lightly.
And we definitely do not take this lightly. Thank you. Paul, is this one, next one yours?
Oh, yes. So you have to move the slot, we'll do it by itself.
Okay, now that the rates have been adopted, it's time to adopt both the water and the sewer budgets for next fiscal year. So Resolution 3109-19 is up for your consideration to adopt the Water Enterprise Fund budget in the amount of $21,556,475. It's made up of $9,722,700 for capital projects, $7,078,650 for wages and benefits, $3,936,125 for operation and maintenance expense, and $819,000 for debt service. Staff's recommendation is to adopt resolution number 3109-19, adopting fiscal year 2019-20 Water Enterprise Fund budget, and authorize staff to incorporate any adjustments or changes necessary as a result of board action. And specifically, that's the action you just took by adopting a rate increase lower than what was originally incorporated into the budget.
So moved.
Second.
You may have to pull your screen down. Oh, you have to pull it down, okay. Okay. Good thing, otherwise I would have done this. Do we have to vote on that?
Let's revote. Yeah, no, stop.
I was just about to say we're making improvements, but we're still 3-2.
I don't know what happened. I was kind of surprised when I saw it, but I thought, okay.
It makes you feel better. I have that fear every time I touch the screen, so don't worry.
Is that the classic fat finger mistake, like on your phone when you hit the button?
Well, I do have
Okay, that's 4-1. Okay, all right, we do have one more quick vote. We have to do the sewer enterprise fund. Okay. All right, Kelly's only an hour and a half late to an appointment, so we're going to try to get her out of here. All right. Please not worry.
Okay, sewer funds. So resolution 3110-19, adopting the sewer fund. It's been prepared for your consideration in the amount of $31,044,387. It includes $9,484,000 for capital projects, $11,350,987 for wages and benefits, $6,692,400 for operations and maintenance, $3,517,000 for debt service. Staff recommendation is to adopt resolution number 3110-19, adopting the fiscal year 2019-20 sewer enterprise fund budget. Period. we don't need the last part of the language.
Right, very good. So moved.
I'll second that.
Psych. Okay, thanks, Kelly. Okay, 4-1. Thank you all. Payment claims.
I'll move approval for payment claims in the amount of $1,417,375. You skipped those.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sewer line.
We did all this time.
Okay, you know what? We got a motion, let's do payment claims and we'll get you.
It should be quick.
I'll go second on payment claims and then you guys are right up. That's my fault. You can't tell I'm going to jump through the beginning of this, can you? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, we see
I didn't mean to go down this too.
Yeah, we'll do it again.
Oh, this one over here.
Jake. Okay, 4-0. All right, now you're up, guys. Sorry about that.
Anyway, before you guys get going, I just want to say congratulations, because we have a new engineer, certified engineer in the house, and so I know it's a lot of work, and so before we start your presentation, I want to say congratulations.
Wait, you,
all the hard work.
You passed PE?
Finally passed all the tests.
There you go.
I think you were studying and working with a baby, and that is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, so congratulations a double.
Yeah, it's probably a lot harder test than it was 4 years ago when I.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, they can find your name.
Thanks, guys. So we're here for the sewer line spot repair and lateral abandonment services bid. So basically, this was a purchasing bid that we went out for. It's something that we've gone out for pretty much every year in the past. And what it is to repair any minor sewer line defects that they find with the CCTV camera. And so this is similar to the repair that we did on Emerald, where they go in, they've got that epoxy resin filled liner, they drag it in there, they fill it out. This one it's cured with UV, so it's a little bit different, a little bit quicker. And so we've identified a lot more defects with the new camera and the enhanced efforts that we've been putting in, getting through that large amount of the system recently. And so identified a lot more spot repairs needed, but that also, we saw a positive effect in that with the bid of we got much cheaper pricing than we've seen in the past per repair. And we got more bidders, more competitive bids, so we're excited about that. And Robotic Sewer Solutions, we haven't worked with them in the past, but Heidi, our purchasing agent, she told the references. Everybody had very positive things to say. The guy that runs the company used to work for one of the other companies that bid, and so all positive things so far. And so we're excited to work with this new company and get some spot repairs done this summer.
And we just asked the board to award the bid to the lowest responsible bidder, Robotics Sewer Solutions Incorporated, in the amount of $159,200, and authorize staff to allow for changes, size estimate, or repairs, site additions, and the contract not to exceed any additional 10% of the contract price.
So moved. Okay. Okay, so we have a motion. Did you guys have any questions or anything like that? On that? Pretty straightforward. I think you guys did your homework. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I'll second Nick's motion.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. Okay. Standing in that lot bid reports. I don't have anything. Do you guys have anything?
I just want to provide an update. The LTCC on Saturday at 10 o'clock, there is a forest management fuels policy forum taking place. Just want to let everyone know that's taking place with kind of the hot button issues that are going around. There was a similar type thing, I think, a couple weeks ago. So, it's just another opportunity if anyone's interested to learn more about fire fuels policy.
Cool. Any board member reports?
Yeah, I have one. It's at the Aqua conferences. I have a very long, detailed report. But I'll ask for maybe permission to put this off to the next meeting because of the extended.
Thanks, I appreciate that, Jim.
All right, Shannon.
You and Shannon were down there, and we'll.
They're having a good time.
I think all the nitty gritty of what went on there can't wait till next meeting. So
the one thing is that we were very involved with headworks issues, and that's a lot of good things are happening there, and I can maybe talk about that Saturday. I'll be there, and.
Anyway, it was a good conference.
Okay, do we have anything with the Oregon County Water Agency?
Let's just say we're working on an expanded project list. We'll be presenting to their board, the water agency, on June 12th. Yes.
Yeah, go ahead with yours. We'll get to staff reports. I got a question for you.
Okay, yeah, so a few items up here on staffing update for 3 positions, associate and senior engineer. That closed May 3rd. We received 10 applications and interviews are scheduled for the week of June 4th. So 10 applications for the engineering position received. The water reuse worker was closed May 6th and we received 51 applications. So a lot of interest in that position, of course. It's a great entry-level position into the district. Interviews are scheduled for May 30th. And customer service inspector, this position was vacated due to Dan's departure, and with a short timeline and strong interest and internal interest in candidates, we limited this opportunity to current employees only. That closed May 15th. We received 2 in-house applications, well qualified, and we will be interviewing those 2 candidates next Wednesday. So that's a quick staffing update. On wildfire planning, I just want to let the board, there was a community wildfire planning meeting last April 25th. I participated in that. I was held at the middle school. There's a number of local agencies, police and fire agencies. I would say well over 100 public were in attendance. And CAL FIRE was there, the Forest Service, OES, Highway Patrol, Lake Valley, Tahoe RCD, Barton had a presentation. It was mostly about notices, evaluation of resources, the need for defensible spaces, and evacuation planning. There were some questions came up about the district's water system, so I was there to speak to the audience about that. And I will email you the board a link if you want to see that presentation. I'll email you the link. You can take a look at that. And also heads up, in Golden Bear this Saturday, there's going to be an evacuation planning event for that neighborhood. And one more thing on wildfire planning. I'll be meeting with Jeff Marshall at the Forest Service about planning and expanding defensible spaces around our critical facilities. So we have about 80 facilities outside the treatment plant and looking to improve our preparedness at those facilities. California Tile Alliance, I'm going to defer this report until next board meeting, waiting for some additional details and information. So finally, and real briefly, community outreach. I was on the radio last Thursday with Shelley and Howie Nave talking about the district. We were talking a lot about groundwater, the public meeting tonight. So perhaps that had some impact on attendance. Perhaps not. But and Shelley has more of them and all that she's been doing for the 218. And in terms of my other outreach presentations, Tahoe Resource Conservation District that needed to be rescheduled. But I do have the TRK Governing Board coming up and a presentation to the League of State Lake Tahoe coming up in the near future.
Under staff reports, is there any of you that have a staff report plan that is a non-time sensitive thing that you might be willing to wait till next meeting? I do want to hear from Chris about the water tank and whatever else is going on, but if Brian, I don't know if it's time sensitive. Is that okay by you guys if we kind of kick that can down the road?
Ours is on, we cut it down, it's only going to take about 45 minutes.
Yeah.
You have about 30 slides.
Actually, we,
Do you have a presentation, Chris?
we do, but do you guys want to see the pictures?
Oh, pictures are good, yeah, pictures are good. Yeah. Remember, you're dealing with board members, you pictures, you know, crayons.
Last Wednesday, I'm sure most of you know, and if you don't know, tank number 2 at Luther Pass there Wednesday afternoon, they valved, it was full, they filled it up, and then they valved it off and left for the night because Thursday morning we were gonna do an inspection on it. The roof inside of it has come apart a little bit, the lining. There's some concerns about the lining coming apart, the rust. So over the winter, we've been out there, each time it snows, we'll get up there and shovel it off.
And the beams in there are compromised from corrosion. Yes. No, it's the arrow forward.
This is out in front of the station, and what it is, it's basically a catch basin. And it was supposed to be for the stormwater coming out, and then it collects in there, and then it goes out to where we thought. We didn't really know if it just goes out in the creek, into the sewer, what it did at that time. And what happened was Thursday, when they went out there prior to the inspection, Jeremy lifted off the lid on top, and he could hear water running. And when you hear water running on a tank that's closed off, not a good sign. So, long story short, last year, if you remember, I came in and we talked about the overflow pipe that was inside of the tank. You were here. Inside there's an overflow, and when it gets up to a certain point, it comes down. And we didn't know where it went. We assumed it went to the sewer, or nobody really knew evidently at that time. That one there. Last year it cracked, and we had water that was coming out of the side of the foundation at the bottom of the tank. Wasn't spilling a lot, but there was a significant amount of water that you could see sweating out. We drained the tank, went in, and welded up the crack. Well, last Thursday, when you noticed the water running, went out to this catch basin here, and there's two pipes that come in. The one on the right is groundwater. The one on the left.
These are the overflow pipes that are connected to the tanks. The one on the left is for tank number 2, the one on the right is for tank number 1. Tank number 1 brings in also the French drains too, so we have groundwater coming on that one. But as soon as I heard that sound, I had one of my employees went out and checked it, found it smelled like effluent in that catch basin. So we called the lab up. We called the lab up and had them come out and tested the liquid coming out of each line. The one on the left tested for effluent, one on the right did not. So then we went ahead and started, we did the dye tabs in the catch basin there. And it was, well, at the end of the driveway, we have drawings that show that, because there's two 18-inch lines coming in the catch basin, and there's a 36-inch line that comes, that shows a deadhead right at that slotted drain at the driveway. I wanted to be sure that people are saying it possibly went to sewer, and nobody really had a good idea where it went. So we got the camera truck out there, dye tabbed it. Turned out it was not connected, it was daylighted at the end of the driveway, and we did have dye tabs coming up over by the barrel there, and it was coming up in this area, and you can see it along the barrel there. So unfortunately the creek is right there. You can see on the bottom of the picture. And, as soon as we figured it out, we started sucking in the drain to mitigate the problem, so we didn't have any more sewage going into the area. And then once they were done doing the inspection, we went ahead and pulled the tank offline immediately, stopped exporting out, from the plant to the tanks, and we just pumped over into Luther as quickly as possible, put the tank offline. They went in the following day on Friday. They found at the bottom of this standpipe in the back there, where the red circle is, it was cracked at the base, and it was leaking into the overflow. So this is the crack that we found on the previous repair. So now we're just kind
of looking at that crack. It was right above the well that we fixed last year. So talking to some of the crew members, when you drain the B line, the sidewalls of the tank have a tendency to flex a little bit. that brace is mounted to the sidewall of the tank. So what we think is happening when you do drain the B line, it's too rigid and it's making that thing flex and cracking at this point. So the tank is off of line. And what we talked about it today, and I think what we're gonna do is go in Monday and have Chuck Idell on heavy maintenance, he's our certified welder, go ahead and re-weld that crack. Leave it offline for now, but we can still utilize this tank in emergency until we come up with something a little bit more permanent. By draining the B line now, it goes through the pumps. So the water's pushing the pumps backwards. So not a good thing. So by doing this, if we have to, we have an emergency, we have to drain the B line, we can do it. But that's not curing our problem. So next Thursday, we have a meeting set up and get some engineering, Shannon, Jeremy, kind of come up with a game plan here. Our first thought was maybe we should just go in there and cap that thing off and weld it. You know, if it's treated sewer water, why have an overflow that goes out with just daylights? But Shannon and Julie brought up some good points that by doing that, there's vents at the top. And we figured if we got rid of this, we plated, if we ever have an overflow, let it come out the vents of the pipe or the tank. But by doing that, you take a chance of washing out the foundation around the tank, which makes perfect sense, that you don't want to do. So just a couple options. This isn't set in stone. One is we cut the pipe, the overflow pipe inside the tank, put some kind of coupling in there where it can flex with the walls if necessary. The second thing is with those walls flexing like they have been, we don't know what the integrity of the walls are anymore in that tank. So it may be wise to have somebody come out, at least assess the walls of the tank, see what we're dealing with. Worst case scenario is we have somebody rehab the tank or replace it.
Then you said you also got structural issues with the roof, right?
Yes, sir. So there's a lot going on. That is worst case scenario, replacing the tank. We haven't had time to really sit down and take a look at it.
You know, the movement of the tank walls doesn't bother me a lot. Nothing's infinitely rigid, you know,
Yes,
so that might be it. But the corrosion at the top, maybe you can brace the overflow off of not a wall, maybe off the floor.
We looked at it, but this thing's big and it's heavy. Yeah, that was one of our thoughts right off the bat too. We haven't had time to sit down and look at it. We will this week.
I'm sure you guys will come up with something good.
Yes, but we wanted to inform you what was going on in case you got hit out in public. It appears that we lost roughly 21,000 gallons. It dropped down about 10 inches overnight. But there's also some concern that the valve that's isolates a tank, but also bleeds into the other one, tank one. Yes. A lot of the water may have gone through that. So doing some estimates and calculations.
So tank one was lower, so it was able to flow in that direction.
That's what we think.
Is that right? Well, that's actually good.
Yeah, we actually had to bring it up on Wednesday. We brought it up to almost overflow at that point. And so we actually lost a good foot. So we were at 38.2. The next day we were at 37.4. So,
but when this was first noticed, Mike Shuffle went down to the barrel out in the front of the station, and there was quite a bit of water coming out. And then when they went to drain the tank, they stuck a bucket underneath to see how many gallons per minute was actually coming out. It came out to 3 gallons a minute. But Mike previously had seen a little bit more, so we're kind of estimating around 5 to 7 gallons. Long story short, we figured to be safe, we lost 8 to 10,000 gallons to the creek.
So how's in your testing, all was negative all down the creek?
Yes, everything.
So then how's, maybe Shannon or John, how's the agencies, LaHunton and all that?
Well, so far so good. We had good interaction with our local board.
Trevor at LaHunton, he called me Friday morning, and we've got a good relationship with LaHunton so far. We don't hide anything from him. I invited him to come out and take a look at the tank, you know, take a look for himself what we're talking about. It's easier, like you said, to see it. He didn't believe me at first. And he hung up the phone after we got done talking, and he called me back a few minutes later. He goes, "Were you serious about me being able to go out there and see this?" And I encourage you to. we're not hiding anything. So he went out there, took a bunch of pictures, and he just could not believe that we even offered to let him go out there and take a look. So at this point, I think all agencies, you know, we've done everything we could. They seem to be okay with it. I can't guarantee what's going to happen here in the next month or two with them.
We'll see, yeah.
Do you think we should be connecting that 36-inch drain into the sewer?
No. Taking a look at it, our sewer would not handle that. Now, we did think about maybe running an 8-inch pipe or something and putting a valve on it in case we ever do, we could throttle it and control it. But with an overflow like that and it hits a sewer, I think that it would inundate every house, probably all the way into Myers. So at this point, when we get the tank fixed and put online, talking with Shannon and the engineering group, this doesn't sound good, but I think at this point, it would be better just to let it overflow out of that pipe instead of trying to inundate our sewer to handle all of that. I know that's not our normal procedure, but right now we don't really have too many options.
Once that water hits a sewer pipe or a manhole, it's now sewage and no longer recycled water. And so a spill coming out of one of those manholes would be much worse and viewed much worse from a registry. And I would say regarding the folks at Wahan, so the folks that we're working with, Trevor, that Chris and folks are talking about, they're on the really kind of the regulatory side. They're the folks that we really interact with a lot. They take this sort of, they document everything and they make recommendations to their enforcement side. And so we don't really have a lot of contact with them. Hopefully we will never hear about this again, but there is the potential that enforcement group decides they want to do something, in which case then we'll be interacting with them quite a bit.
Crystal Wright did bring up a good point. Trump's over there, he's been here for 42 years. Years ago, we used to treat our sewage to where you could drink it, basically. And he thinks that maybe back then when they first built Luther Pass and were stored in the tanks, that we didn't have to worry about the overflow.
The overflow could just go into the ground.
You could drink the water.
Right.
But then we switched over to a different type of treatment, and I don't believe this was addressed at that point. So that was just one theory. It makes a lot of sense. Julie came up with an idea that maybe that pipe was a holding pipe and maybe the end rotted out. We just don't know enough at this point to give you a detailed reason why this leaks out in here.
And so going forward, Chris mentioned this meeting on Thursday, our intent is to get together then and discuss around the table, okay, what don't we know? What do we need to know? And then we'll go out and fill that data gap and figure out answer those questions. And then that'll allow us to get back together and come up with some solutions that we will then bring back to you and tell you what's going on. I did also want to talk about, just very briefly, so what are the consequences of having this unit offline or having this tank not being operable for us? They mentioned the beeline. By doing this welding and then closing it off, we're mitigating that. So if we do have to drain the beeline, we can now dump it into this tank.
How does that happen?
What's that?
How does that happen?
Once every decade or so.
Okay.
I think it's happened unexpectedly one time since it's been in service.
Okay.
Right.
Right.
So not too worried about that. The other issue, another issue is this, of course, is a redundant tank, right? If we have problems with the other tank, we've now eliminated our redundancy. Again, by doing the repair that they're doing, it gives us some place to send water if we need to. But the other piece that is a little more pressing now is that we need all of that tank volume out there in order for our operations staff to do the time of use pumping and the energy savings that they've been doing. And so this really eliminates their ability to do that. So we're going to see some increased electrical costs because of their inability to have access to that balance.
Well, the evaluation will tell us where we're at. So good job, guys.
Another point on the beeline, how often we have to drain it. Well, we were planning on draining it this summer so that we can inspect it, so that we can do the repairs on it with the tank repairs. So now having the tank that we store that water in our service is going to make just doing the inspection to plan for the project much more difficult. So.
Right, and I don't think you're going to get an evaluation in a couple of months. So.
One other thing that came up this morning I forgot to talk about, the valve that isolates the water going into the tank is leaking by So last Friday, we drained it, sucked out the water, found where the crack is. They went in today.
Yeah, I'd double check today and see what the condition was like, if it was leaking through or not. And it was about an inch below the manway on the tank.
So it's about 2 foot in there.
Yeah.
So in 6 days, it's bled by about 2 feet into that tank. So that's another reason we want to get in there, get that sealed up. We think the head pressure of all the water is what helps push all the water out through that crack. But anything coming out of there just makes us all nervous. So that was another reason to kind of push this forward and get it welded.
It's at more than 600 pounds, isn't it?
I'm sorry?
It's more than 600 pounds PSI at that point?
With it full?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
How many gallons are in the beeline if you had to drain it quicker?
Oh, we discussed this, so.
I know.
And we have some rough calculations that we don't necessarily trust at this point, but it is a lot less than this tank. Yes, yeah, this tank absolutely, a portion of this tank holds the volume of the beeline, if I am
Right,
correct.
and I think it's about 6 feet. You need a wastewater treatment plant operator.
The tank is actually operated at a lower level than is available to operate the tank at, because we reserve this volume for emergency drainage of the beeline. And that was
the walls that might be good to keep it down too, right?
Well, and I'd also just want to say real quick, hats off to Jeremy and to Chris and their crews for getting out there. You guys they had this thing handled, and spilling stopped within 2.5 hours. Given the volume that was coming out of there, that is a remarkable response time. Definitely a lot of cards fell in our favor with respect to that, but these guys did a great job. Their crews did a great job, and I really appreciate what you've done.
I have to admit, we had pumps, sewer, and the water department out there running camels. When there's an emergency, everybody's on board, everybody helps. We may have an emergency, you may go out there and see 10 people out there. Well, that, like in front of your house that one day, or down the street.
Yeah.
But when there's an emergency, everybody goes out, tries to correct the emergency or stop the spill, whatever it may be, and then we start letting people go. And it's just amazing how all the crews work together, seriously. The supervisors, they do a great job with the crews. It's just one big team here, one big team.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we have been planning some improvements at this tank, I think about 2 years out, so we'll pull those funds in
Actually, for next summer.
for next summer.
Yeah, that's one of the projects.
Is it $400,000, or do you recall that?
I don't remember, the scope had,
300,000 or 400,000?
You referenced the operation.
Okay.
the scope was originally just recoding each of the tanks one at a time. So the 2 was going to happen next summer, and tank 1 was going to happen the following summer. And then we knew there was some valving work to be done, and then some work on the fuel tank. And so
And now the scope will change.
now it's,
Right.
yeah.
We grow a little bit?
Yeah.
We'll see.
Cool. So did I scare the rest of the staff reports off? Okay, good. Do you think we can just fire right through this closed session so quick, or do you guys want to? Sorry. Do you guys want to break real quick? We've been sitting here a long time. 5 minutes? 5 minutes.
Half an hour, actually.
Yeah.
You guys-
I mean, how does, 6 o'clock, we're,
Out of closed session and open session, nothing to report, meeting adjourned.